What do you say when your boss asks if your bed is big enough for two, and 24 hours later, she's dead? Ethan Brooks thought he knew what heartbreak felt like. He'd buried a wife, raised a daughter alone, and survived every quiet, grinding day that followed. But nothing prepared him for the moment Victoria Hale smiled across her executive desk and asked that question. Nothing prepared him for the way fate would twist that single conversation into something he could never undo. This is a story about secrets buried in plain sight, about love that arrives too late, and about a truth so devastating it will rewrite everything you thought you understood about family. If you're ready for a story that will break your heart and put it back together in ways you never expected, stay with me until the end. And if this story moves you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back to that Friday afternoon when everything changed. The November rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victoria Hale's corner office, turning downtown Seattle into a watercolor blur of gray and silver. Ethan Brooks stood just inside the doorway, laptop bag slung over one shoulder, wondering why his boss had asked him to stay late on a Friday when everyone else had already fled for the weekend. "Close the door, Ethan." Victoria didn't look up from the document she was reviewing, but there was something different in her voice, something that made the air in the room feel thinner, harder to breathe. Ethan did as she asked, his heart performing an unwelcome acrobatic routine in his chest. In the 3 years he'd worked as senior project manager at Hale Technologies, he'd learned to read Victoria's moods with the precision of a meteorologist tracking storm systems. He knew the difference between her "someone's getting fired" voice and her "we just landed a major contract" voice. He knew when she was tired, when she was frustrated, when she was 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room and barely holding back her impatience while the rest of them caught up. But this voice, this quiet, almost careful tone, this was new. "Sit down," she said, finally looking up. "Please." The "please" was what really worried him. Ethan lowered himself into one of the leather chairs facing her desk, setting his bag on the floor. Through the windows behind Victoria, the Space Needle was barely visible through the rain, a ghost of itself against the darkening sky. The office smelled faintly of her perfume, something expensive and subtle that he'd trained himself not to notice. The same way he'd trained himself not to notice the way her dark hair fell across her shoulders when she leaned forward, or the way her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when she was genuinely amused rather than just professionally pleasant. "You're making me nervous," Ethan said, trying for lightness and not quite achieving it. Victoria's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. She was 41 to his 36, though she could have passed for younger if not for the weight she carried in her eyes, the particular weariness of someone who'd built an empire from nothing and knew exactly what it had cost. "Good," she said. "I've been nervous all day, so at least we're even." She stood up, moving to the bar cart in the corner where she kept a selection of whiskeys that cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. She poured 2 fingers into a crystal glass, then hesitated and poured a second glass. "I don't usually drink with employees," she said, carrying both glasses back to the desk. She handed one to Ethan before settling into her chair again, this time at an angle, as if the formal barrier of the desk between them was suddenly too much. Ethan took the glass but didn't drink. "Are you firing me?" "God, no." Victoria laughed, but it was a brittle sound there and gone in an instant. "The opposite, actually. I'm promoting you, VP of Product Development, 50% raise, full benefits package, stock options, the works." She took a sip of her whiskey, her eyes never leaving his face. "You've earned it 10 times over, Ethan. You're the best thing that ever happened to this company." The words should have filled him with elation. Instead, they settled over him like a weight. Because Victoria Hale didn't get nervous about giving good news, and she certainly didn't pour expensive whiskey to do it. "Thank you," he said carefully. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet." Victoria set down her glass with a soft click against the wooden desk. "There's something else, something I need to ask you, and I need you to answer honestly, even if you think I won't like what you have to say." The rain intensified, a sudden roar against the windows that made both of them glance toward the sound before Victoria's gaze returned to his face with an intensity that pinned him in place. "Okay," Ethan said. His voice came out rougher than he'd intended. Victoria took a breath, as if steadying herself before a jump. I've been trying to figure out how to ask you this for 6 months. Maybe longer. And every time I get close, I talk myself out of it because I tell myself it's inappropriate, or it's unprofessional, or I'm reading signals that aren't there. She paused. But life is short, Ethan. It's so goddamn short, and I'm tired of being careful. Ethan's grip tightened on the whiskey glass. He knew where this was going, had known, on some level, for longer than he wanted to admit. The late nights working together, the conversations that drifted from business into personal territory, the way she always remembered that he took his coffee black with 1 sugar, the way she'd sent flowers when Lily had been sick with pneumonia last winter, the way they'd developed a shorthand that didn't require words. He'd felt the current running between them, electric and dangerous, and he'd done everything in his power to ignore it. Because Victoria Hale was brilliant and beautiful and completely out of his league. Because he was a single father who barely had time to sleep, let alone navigate whatever this thing between them might become. Because workplace romances were complicated enough without adding in the CEO-employee power dynamic that could destroy both their careers if things went wrong. Victoria, he started, but she held up a hand. Let me finish. Please. She stood up again, moving to the windows, her silhouette outlined against the gray light. I'm not asking you to make any promises. I'm not asking you to jump into something you're not ready for. I just need to know if I'm imagining this connection between us. She turned to face him, and in the dim light of the office, her vulnerability was almost painful to witness. Is your bed big enough for 2, Ethan? The question hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Not a proposition, exactly. More like an opening. A way of asking if he'd thought about it too, the possibility of them. The logistics of combining their lives. The question of whether there was even room in his small, carefully ordered existence for someone like her. Ethan set down his glass and stood up, closing the distance between them until he was close enough to see the fine lines around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands that she was trying to hide. Yes, he said quietly. It is. Victoria closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, something had shifted, a door opening, a barrier falling. I was hoping you'd say that. But I have Lily to think about, Ethan continued, forcing himself to be honest, even as everything in him wanted to lean into this moment, into the possibility Victoria was offering. She's 9 years old and she's already lost her mother. I can't bring someone into her life unless I'm sure, unless we're both sure. I know. Victoria's hand came up, hesitated, then settled gently against his chest, just above his heart, as if she could feel it racing beneath her palm. I'm not asking for certainty, Ethan. I'm just asking for a chance. For both of us to stop pretending we don't feel this. What about the company, the optics? Fuck the optics. The vulgarity sounded strange in Victoria's cultured voice, but there was steel beneath it. I've spent 20 years building this place, and I'll be damned if I let it dictate who I'm allowed to care about. We'd have to be careful, yes, professional at work, but we're both adults, we can figure it out. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons this was complicated, all the ways it could go wrong, but standing there with Victoria's hand pressed against his chest, with the rain creating a cocoon of sound around them and the rest of the world reduced to distant static, all his carefully constructed defenses felt paper thin. I need time, he said finally, to think about how to talk to Lily, to make sure I'm doing this for the right reasons. Of course. Victoria's hand dropped away, but she was smiling, a real smile this time, soft and genuine. I'm not going anywhere. Take all the time you need. What about starting with coffee, Ethan found himself saying. Tomorrow, somewhere neutral. We can talk about what this might look like without the weight of the office hanging over us. Victoria's expression transformed, something lighting up behind her eyes that made her look younger, almost hopeful. Tomorrow, she agreed. There's actually something I need to tell you, something important. She glanced at the window, then back at him. But not here, not now. Let's do it properly. Mysterious, Ethan said, trying to lighten the moment, even as curiosity sparked in his chest. Necessary, Victoria corrected. She reached out and squeezed his hand, just once, quick and warm. Thank you for being honest with me, for not making this more awkward than I already did. You didn't make it awkward. You made it real. They stood there for another moment, neither quite willing to break the spell, until Victoria finally stepped back and became once again the composed CEO he knew from boardrooms and quarterly reports. "Go home," she said softly. "Hug your daughter. I'll text you tomorrow morning with a time and place." Ethan nodded, collecting his bag and his mostly untouched whiskey glass. At the door, he paused and looked back. Victoria had returned to her desk, but she wasn't looking at the documents anymore. She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between anticipation and sadness, as if she could already see the future unfolding and wasn't sure whether to be terrified or relieved. "Victoria?" "Yes?" "That thing you need to tell me tomorrow. Is it bad?" She considered the question for a long moment. "It's complicated," she said finally, "but I think it might be the most important conversation we'll ever have." The drive home took Ethan through the wet streets of Seattle, past coffee shops closing up for the night and restaurants just hitting their dinner rush. His mind kept replaying the conversation, turning it over like a puzzle box he couldn't quite solve. Victoria's question, his answer, the way her hand had felt against his chest. The mention of something important she needed to tell him, something she couldn't say in the office. By the time he pulled into the driveway of his modest Ballard Craftsman, the rain had softened to a drizzle. Light glowed warm in the front windows, and through the glass he could see his daughter, Lily, curled up on the couch with a book, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. His sister-in-law, Marie, opened the door before he could get his keys out. She'd been watching Lily since Sarah died 4 years ago, helping out on late nights and emergency work trips, filling the gaps left by Ethan's impossible schedule. "She ate all her dinner and finished her homework," Marie said, pulling on her jacket. "Reading level's gone up 2 grades since the school year started. That kid's going to be running circles around you by middle school." "She already does," Ethan said, smiling tiredly. "Thanks for staying late." Marie studied him with the knowing look of someone who'd watched him grieve and rebuild and slowly learn how to be both mother and father to a daughter who'd inherited her mother's quick mind and stubborn independence. "You look different. Good different." "Long day," Ethan said, not quite ready to explain what had happened in Victoria's office. Marie didn't push, but her expression said she'd file that away for later interrogation. "I'll see you Monday. Tell Lily I said goodnight." After Marie left, Ethan locked the door and moved into the living room where Lily had looked up from her book, some fantasy novel with dragons on the cover that was definitely above her reading level, but which she was devouring anyway. "Hey, kiddo." "Dad!" Lily scrambled off the couch and threw herself at him with the full-body enthusiasm of a 9-year-old who hadn't yet learned to be self-conscious about affection. Ethan caught her and lifted her up, even though she was getting too big for it, even though his back protested the movement. "You smell like rain," Lily observed, wrinkling her nose. "That's because it's raining. What are you reading?" Lily launched into an enthusiastic explanation of the book's plot, something involving dragon riders and a war between kingdoms, while Ethan carried her into the kitchen and started assembling a late dinner for himself. He'd learned to cook by necessity after Sarah died, and while his skills would never threaten any celebrity chefs, he could manage decent pasta and had mastered the art of sneaking vegetables into meals without Lily noticing. "Oh," Lily said suddenly, as if remembering something crucial. "Miss Victoria sent me something today. Aunt Marie helped me open it." Ethan paused in the middle of draining the pasta. "What do you mean she sent you something?" Lily hopped off her stool and ran to the living room, returning moments later with a large, flat package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a beautifully illustrated book, a collector's edition of The Little Princess, with gilt edges and detailed artwork. There was a card tucked inside the cover, written in Victoria's precise handwriting. For Lily. Because every girl should know that real princesses are defined by their courage and kindness, not their circumstances. Keep reading, keep dreaming. Ethan stared at the card, something twisting in his chest. Victoria had met Lily exactly 3 times, once at a company picnic, once when Ethan had to bring her to the office during a childcare emergency, and once at a charity event Victoria had invited them both to last spring. But she'd remembered Lily's love of books, her fascination with stories about brave girls who didn't need rescuing. "She's really nice," Lily said, watching his face carefully. "I like her." She talks to me like I'm a real person, not just a kid. She is really nice, Ethan agreed, his voice rougher than he'd intended. Are you friends with her? Like real friends? The question was innocent, but it made Ethan's pulse quicken. We work together. But yes, I guess you could say we're friends. Lily nodded slowly, processing this information with the seriousness she brought to everything. Good. You should have more friends. You work too much, says the girl who reads books 2 grade levels above her own. That's different. Books don't count as work. They ate dinner together at the kitchen counter, Lily chattering about school and her best friend Emma and the science project they were planning, while Ethan listened and made appropriate noises and tried not to think about Victoria's question, about the way her vulnerability had stripped away every professional defense he'd built, about what tomorrow's conversation might bring. After dinner, he helped Lily with her bath and tucked her into bed, reading 2 chapters of her dragon book even though it was past her bedtime. When he finally turned off the light and closed her door most of the way, leaving it cracked the way she liked, he felt the full weight of the day settle over him. In his own room, the bed that was, in fact, big enough for 2, though no one but him had slept in it since Sarah died, Ethan sat on the edge of the mattress and pulled out his phone. There was already a text from Victoria, sent half an hour ago. Thank you for tonight, for being honest, for being you. Sleep well, Ethan. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. 10 a.m. at Lighthouse Coffee on Queen Anne? It's quiet and private. I'll be the nervous wreck in the corner booth. Ethan smiled despite himself and typed back, I'll be the one trying to figure out if this is really happening or if I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a stress dream. 10 a.m. works. See you then. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, it's real. I promise. And Ethan, thank you for the book idea. I wasn't sure if it was too forward, but Lily deserves to know how special she is. Ethan's throat tightened. He typed, She loved it. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Get some rest. Big day tomorrow. Ethan set down the phone and lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow. He would sit across from Victoria Hale in a quiet coffee shop and have a conversation that might change everything. She would tell him something important, something complicated, and he would have to decide whether he was brave enough to let her into the life he'd built so carefully around his daughter. Is your bed big enough for 2? The question echoed in his mind as he closed his eyes. The answer was yes, but the real question, the one that would matter in the morning, was whether his heart had room for the risk. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright, the storm from the previous night having scrubbed the sky clean. Ethan woke early, made breakfast for Lily, and arranged for Marie to come over again even though it was the weekend. He told Lily he had an important meeting, which was technically true, and promised to be back by lunchtime. Lighthouse Coffee occupied the ground floor of a converted house on Queen Anne Hill, all exposed brick and mismatched furniture and the kind of deliberately unpretentious atmosphere that somehow cost more than Starbucks. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early, ordering a black coffee and claiming a table in the back corner where privacy and sightlines intersected. Victoria arrived at exactly 10 a.m., which didn't surprise him. She was dressed casually, for her anyway, in dark jeans and a dove gray sweater that made her eyes look even darker. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and without the armor of her usual business attire, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Hey, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. Hey! They looked at each other for a moment, and then both started laughing, nervous, uncertain sounds that broke the tension. This is weird, Victoria said. So weird, Ethan agreed. Good weird, but weird. I didn't sleep at all last night. I kept rehearsing what I was going to say and then changing my mind and starting over. Victoria wrapped her hands around her coffee cup as if trying to absorb its warmth. I don't think I've been this nervous since my first pitch to venture capitalists 20 years ago. You don't have to be nervous, not with me. That's exactly why I'm nervous. Victoria took a breath, visibly steadying herself. Okay, I'm just going to say this because if I try to ease into it, I'll lose my nerve. There's something I need to tell you about Lily. Every instinct in Ethan's body went on high alert. What about her? How much do you know about her adoption? About her biological parents? The question was so unexpected that Ethan actually leaned back in his chair as if physical distance could help him process what Victoria was asking. I know what the agency told us when Sarah and I adopted her. Mother was a teenager who couldn't keep her. Father was out of the picture. It was a closed adoption. No contact, no identifying information. Why? Victoria's hands tightened around her coffee cup. When I was 16 years old, I got pregnant. My parents... She stopped, swallowed hard. My parents were not good people, Ethan. My father was a drunk who thought his fists solved problems. My mother was too scared of him to intervene. When they found out I was pregnant, they gave me exactly two choices: get rid of it or get out. Ethan felt something cold and sharp settling into his chest. Victoria. I wanted to keep her. Victoria's voice cracked, just slightly. God, I wanted to keep her so badly. But I was 16 and alone and terrified. The father was my high school boyfriend who disappeared the second he found out. I had no money, no support, nowhere to go. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I gave my baby up for adoption to a couple in Seattle who promised they would love her and give her everything I couldn't. The coffee shop seemed to have gone silent, or maybe that was just the roaring in Ethan's ears. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only stare at Victoria as she continued, tears now streaming silently down her face. I spent 25 years trying not to think about her, trying to build a life that would make sense of that choice. I told myself she was better off, that I'd done the right thing. But about 6 months ago, I hired a private investigator. I needed to know she was okay. I needed to know she was happy. Victoria reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. The investigator came back with this. Ethan's hands shook as he opened the folder. Inside were documents, birth records, adoption papers, photographs. And there, in black and white, was the truth that would destroy his world. Baby girl Hale, born April 15th, 2016, adopted by Sarah and Ethan Brooks. No, Ethan breathed. She's mine, Victoria whispered. Lily is my daughter. The coffee shop spun. Ethan gripped the edge of the table, trying to anchor himself against the wave of shock and disbelief and horror crashing over him. That's not possible. The dates don't... I lied about my age on the forms. I told them I was 18 when I was really 16. I was terrified they wouldn't let me go through with the adoption if they knew the truth. Victoria's voice was steady now, as if confessing this truth had brought her back to solid ground. I've had months to process this, Ethan. Months to verify every detail. I know this is devastating for you to hear, but it's the truth. Lily is my biological daughter. Ethan couldn't look at her, couldn't look at the documents, could only sit there as the foundation of his entire world cracked and shifted beneath him. Lily, his bright, beautiful daughter who'd been his reason for living since Sarah died, had another mother. A mother who was sitting across from him right now, who'd asked him if his bed was big enough for two, not as an invitation to romance, but as a question about whether there was room in his life for her to be part of her daughter's world. I'm not trying to take her from you, Victoria said quickly, desperately. That's not what this is. I signed away my parental rights. Legally, you're her father in every way that matters, but I can't pretend I don't know anymore. I can't keep sending her presents and pretending it's just because I'm your boss. I needed you to know the truth. You should have told me before, Ethan said, his voice coming out harsh. Before last night, before you asked me that question, before you let me think. He couldn't finish, couldn't articulate the betrayal that was twisting through him like poison. I know, you're right, but I was scared, Ethan. Scared you'd shut me out. Scared you'd think I was trying to manipulate you or that I had some ulterior motive. Victoria's composure finally cracked completely, and she buried her face in her hands. I'm so sorry. I handled this all wrong. I wanted one moment where you looked at me as Victoria, not as the woman who gave birth to your daughter. I wanted to know if what I felt was real or just my own desperate wish to be part of Lily's life. Ethan stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I need to go. I need to think. Ethan, please. What do you want from me? He heard his voice rising and forced it back down, aware of the other customers glancing their way. Do you want me to thank you for telling me? Do you want me to invite you into Lily's life like it's that simple? She's 9 years old, Victoria. She doesn't need the complication of finding out her boss is secretly her birth mother. I know that. I'm not asking for anything right now. I just needed you to know the truth. Well, now I know. Ethan grabbed the folder off the table. I'm going home. I need to figure out how the hell to process this. He made it halfway to the door before Victoria's voice stopped him. Ethan, wait. He turned back reluctantly. Victoria had stood up, and she looked smaller somehow, stripped of all the power and confidence that usually surrounded her like armor. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please don't shut me out completely. Whatever happens between us, Lily deserves to know where she came from. She deserves to know that I never stopped thinking about her. That giving her up was the hardest thing I ever did, but I did it because I loved her. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the impossible position she'd put him in. But looking at Victoria's tear-stained face, seeing the raw vulnerability in her eyes, all he could feel was a terrible, crushing sadness. I'm not going to make any promises right now, he said finally. I need time. We both need time. Of course, take all the time you need. Ethan left without another word, climbing into his car and sitting in the parking lot for 10 minutes before he trusted himself to drive. His phone buzzed, a text from Marie asking if he'd be home soon. Lily was asking for him. Lily, his daughter. Victoria's daughter. Both things true simultaneously, and he had no idea how to reconcile them. He drove home in a daze, the folder sitting on the passenger seat like a live grenade. Marie took one look at his face when he walked in and immediately offered to stay longer, but Ethan shook his head. He needed to be alone with his daughter, needed to look at her and see if anything had changed now that he knew the truth. Lily was in the backyard, kicking a soccer ball against the fence with single-minded determination. She looked up when Ethan came out, and her face split into a grin that made his heart crack. Dad, want to play? Sure, kiddo. They spent the next hour kicking the ball back and forth, Lily narrating an elaborate story about a championship game, while Ethan tried to focus on her joy, her energy, her complete and utter innocence of the bomb that had just detonated in his life. She had Victoria's eyes, he realized, the same dark intensity, the same ability to look at you and make you feel seen. How had he never noticed before? By the time they came inside for lunch, Ethan had made a decision. He wouldn't tell Lily. Not yet. Not until he'd figured out what it meant, what Victoria wanted, what was best for his daughter. She deserved better than having this truth dropped on her before anyone had figured out how to handle it. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan opened the folder and read through every document Victoria had provided. Birth certificates, adoption papers, the investigator's report. All of it confirmed what Victoria had told him. She'd been a scared 16-year-old who'd made an impossible choice, and now, 25 years later, fate had brought her daughter back into her life in the most unlikely way possible. His phone buzzed around 10 p.m. A text from Victoria. I'm sorry for all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to hear it again. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. Lily's happiness comes first. It always has. Ethan stared at the message for a long time before typing back. I need some time. I don't know what comes next, but I need space to figure it out. I understand. Take all the time you need. He set down the phone and walked to Lily's room, standing in her doorway and watching her sleep. She was sprawled across her bed in that boneless way of children, completely at peace, completely unaware that her world had shifted on its axis. I'm going to protect you, Ethan whispered into the darkness. Whatever happens, I'm going to make sure you're okay. But even as he said it, he couldn't shake the image of Victoria's face, the raw pain, the desperate hope, the love that had never really faded despite 25 years of silence. She was Lily's mother, and no matter how much Ethan wanted to ignore that fact, it wasn't going to disappear. Sunday morning arrived cold and overcast. Ethan made pancakes, helped Lily with a school project, and tried to pretend everything was normal. They went to the park in the afternoon, and Lily ran around with other kids while Ethan sat on a bench and tried to process the impossible situation he found himself in. Around 4 p.m., his phone rang. Victoria's name on the screen. He almost didn't answer, but something, instinct, curiosity, or maybe just the memory of her tears, made him pick up. Hello? Ethan. Victoria's voice was strange, too controlled. I need you to come to my house. Now. What? Why? Please, I can't explain over the phone. It's... She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. I'm scared, Ethan. Something's wrong. I need you here. Every instinct told him this was a bad idea, that getting more entangled with Victoria would only make everything more complicated, but the fear in her voice overrode his caution. Give me the address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He dropped Lily off with Marie, making vague excuses about a work emergency, and drove to the address Victoria had given him. She lived in Magnolia, in a modern glass and steel house overlooking the water, the kind of place that screamed success and money and a life completely different from his modest craftsman in Ballard. Victoria answered the door before he could knock. She looked terrible, pale and shaking, with dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept any better than he had. What's going on? Ethan asked, following her inside. The house was immaculate, all clean lines and expensive art and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered stunning views of the Sound. But Victoria led him past all of it to a home office, where papers were spread across the desk in chaotic disarray. I've been having chest pains, Victoria said without preamble. Since Friday night. I thought it was anxiety at first, stress from telling you about Lily, but it's getting worse. And there's something else. She picked up a medical file from the desk. I have a congenital heart condition, something I was born with. The doctor said it might never be a problem, but if it did become a problem... She stopped, took a breath. It could be sudden. I could be fine 1 minute and gone the next. Ethan felt ice flooding his veins. Have you seen a doctor today? I have an appointment tomorrow morning, but I needed to see you first, because if something happens to me... Victoria's voice cracked. I need to know that Lily will be okay, that she'll understand why I gave her up, that she'll know I never stopped loving her. Nothing's going to happen to you, Ethan said, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. You don't know that. Nobody knows that. Victoria moved to one of the windows, wrapping her arms around herself. I've spent 6 months working up the courage to tell you the truth about Lily, and now that I finally have, I'm terrified I've ruined everything. That you'll hate me. That you'll keep her from me even if I survive this. Ethan crossed the room and, without thinking, pulled Victoria into his arms. She stiffened for a second, then collapsed against him, shaking with silent sobs. I don't hate you, he said quietly. I'm angry and confused, and I don't know what the hell we're supposed to do with this information. But I don't hate you. They stood like that for a long moment, Victoria crying into his chest while Ethan held her and tried to process the fact that his boss, his daughter's birth mother, the woman who'd asked if his bed was big enough for two, was falling apart in his arms because she was convinced she was dying. I've written everything down, Victoria said finally, pulling away and wiping at her eyes. Letters for Lily, for you, for my sister, if she can bring herself to read them. I've updated my will, made arrangements for the company. I'm not... She laughed, a bitter sound. I'm not being dramatic. I'm just trying to be prepared. You need to go to the hospital. Now. Not tomorrow. Now. I will, after this. I just needed to see you first, to make sure you understood. Understood what? Victoria looked at him with those dark, intense eyes, Lily's eyes, and said, That Friday afternoon in my office, when I asked about your bed, I wasn't trying to seduce you. I was trying to figure out if there was space in your life for me, for Lily to have both her father's and her mother. I know how that sounds now, but it's the truth. I wanted to know if we could build something, not a romance, not yet anyway, but a family, the kind I never had growing up. Ethan felt tears burning behind his own eyes. Victoria, let me finish, please. She took his hand, squeezed it once. If something happens to me, I need you to tell Lily the truth. Not right away, maybe. Not until she's ready. But eventually. She deserves to know she was loved. That I gave her up because I couldn't give her the life she deserved, not because I didn't want her. Nothing is going to happen to you, Ethan said again, more forcefully this time. You're going to the hospital, they're going to figure out what's wrong, and you're going to be fine. And then we're all going to sit down, you, me, and eventually Lily, and figure out what this looks like. Because you're right. She deserves to know the truth. And she deserves to have you in her life. Victoria's face crumpled. Do you mean that? I don't know what I mean about most of this. But I know Lily deserves better than secrets. And I know that if you'd been in my position, if someone had kept your child from you for 9 years, you'd move heaven and earth to be part of their life. Thank you. Victoria was crying again, but these tears felt different, softer. I know I don't deserve your grace right now, but thank you. Ethan stayed with Victoria for another hour, making her promise to go to the emergency room if the chest pains got worse, extracting her doctor's name and appointment time for the morning. Before he left, she handed him a sealed envelope. Just in case, she said, if something happens to me tonight, read this. It has everything Lily needs to know. You're going to be fine, Ethan insisted, but he took the envelope anyway. He drove home in a fog, the envelope burning a hole in his jacket pocket. Marie had already left. She'd texted that Lily had dinner and was watching a movie and would probably be asleep by the time he got back. Ethan found his daughter curled up on the couch, half asleep, some Disney movie playing on the TV. Hey, kiddo, he said softly. Lily opened her eyes and smiled sleepily. You were gone a long time. I know. I'm sorry. Work stuff. Is everything okay? Yeah, everything's okay. It was a lie, but it was the lie Lily needed to hear. Ethan carried her up to bed, tucked her in, and kissed her forehead. In sleep, she looked exactly like the photos he'd seen in Victoria's investigator's report. The same face, 25 years apart, connecting past and present in a way that should have been impossible. Downstairs, Ethan poured himself a glass of whiskey he didn't drink and sat in the dark living room, turning Victoria's envelope over in his hands. He should open it, should know what it said. But something kept him from breaking the seal, some superstitious belief that as long as the envelope remained unopened, Victoria would be fine. The Schrodinger's cat of letters, both comforting and devastating until observed. His phone buzzed around 11 p.m. A text from Victoria. At the ER, they're running tests. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being the father Lily needed when I couldn't be. Ethan texted back. Keep me posted. I meant what I said. You're going to be fine. He waited for a response that didn't come. Eventually, exhaustion won out over worry, and he fell asleep on the couch with his phone in his hand and Victoria's letter on the coffee table. He woke at 6 a.m. to sunlight streaming through the windows and his neck protesting the awkward angle he'd slept in. For a moment, he couldn't remember why he'd fallen asleep downstairs. Then it all came rushing back. Victoria's revelation, her fear, the letter. He checked his phone, no new messages. Ethan tried calling Victoria's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried texting, no response. By 7 a.m., when Lily came downstairs asking for breakfast, unease had solidified into genuine fear. Something was wrong. He made Lily breakfast, got her dressed, and dropped her off at Marie's under the pretense of an important work meeting. Then he drove to Hale Technologies, hoping to find someone who knew where Victoria was, what had happened at the hospital. The office was nearly empty on a Sunday morning, but Victoria's assistant, Jennifer, was there, which wasn't unusual. Jennifer practically lived at the office, managing Victoria's impossible schedule with the efficiency of a Swiss watch. Ethan, Jennifer looked up as he approached and her face was pale. Oh God, you haven't heard. Heard what? Jennifer stood up, moving around her desk as if she needed the physical support. Victoria died last night. A heart attack. They tried to revive her, but her voice broke. She's gone. She's really gone. The world tilted. Ethan gripped the edge of Jennifer's desk, trying to stay upright as the words crashed over him like a wave. That's not possible. I just saw her yesterday. She was going to the hospital. They were running tests. I know, but something went wrong. Her heart just... Jennifer wiped at her eyes. The board is meeting this morning. They're trying to figure out what happens next. The company, her estate, all of it. It's a nightmare. Ethan couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All he could see was Victoria's face yesterday afternoon, pale and scared, telling him about her heart condition, handing him that envelope, making him promise to tell Lily the truth. I have to go, he said, backing away from Jennifer's desk. Ethan, wait. But he was already moving, half running to his car, his hand shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. Victoria was dead. The woman who'd asked if his bed was big enough for two was dead. Lily's biological mother was dead, and she'd never know the truth. He drove home on autopilot, pulled into his driveway, and sat in the car for 10 minutes before he could make himself go inside. The house was empty. Lily still at Marie's, and Ethan found himself standing in his living room, staring at the envelope on the coffee table. "Just in case," Victoria had said. With trembling hands, Ethan opened the envelope. The letter inside was handwritten, several pages long, and it began with two simple words that destroyed him. "Dear Lily." Ethan's hands shook as he unfolded the pages, Victoria's handwriting flowing across the paper in neat, careful lines. Each word felt like a knife. "Dear Lily, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm so sorry. I had so many things I wanted to tell you, so many years I wanted to spend watching you grow up from a distance, being grateful that you existed in this world, even if you didn't know who I was. Your father, Ethan, is the best man I've ever known. When I found out he was raising you after your mom, Sarah, passed away, I felt such relief. Because I knew you were safe, I knew you were loved, and that's all I ever wanted for you. I need you to know that giving you up was the hardest thing I ever did. I was 16 years old, scared, and completely alone. My parents weren't kind people, and I had no one to help me. I chose adoption because I wanted you to have everything I couldn't give you. A stable home, loving parents, a chance at a real life. For 25 years, I wondered about you. I wondered if you were happy, if you were healthy, if you grew up knowing how wanted you were. 6 months ago, I hired someone to find you, and when I discovered you were Ethan's daughter, working at my company, living just across town, it felt like fate. Like the universe was giving me one more chance to make sure you knew the truth. I'm not asking for anything, sweetheart. I signed away my rights a long time ago. Ethan is your real father in every way that matters. But I want you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. That every success I built, every company milestone, every moment of my life was shaped by the choice I made to give you a better future than I could provide. Be brave. Be kind. And know that you were loved by more people than you'll ever realize. Always, Victoria. Ethan read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face, before he could bring himself to set it down. Victoria had written this knowing she might die, had spent her last days making sure Lily would understand, would know the truth even if Victoria couldn't be there to tell her herself. The weight of it crushed him. The woman who'd asked about his bed hadn't been flirting. She'd been reaching for her daughter, and now she was gone. And Lily would never know her, would never understand the sacrifice Victoria had made, or the love she'd carried for 25 years. His phone rang. Marie's name on the screen. "Lily's asking when you're coming back," Marie said. "Is everything okay? You sounded strange this morning." "No," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "Nothing's okay. Can you keep her a few more hours? I need time." "Ethan, you're scaring me. What happened?" "Victoria Hale died last night. Heart attack. She's gone." Silence on the other end. Then, softly, "Oh my God. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I know you two were close." Close. The word didn't begin to cover it. But Marie didn't know about the adoption, about Victoria's revelation, about the impossible truth that had died with her. "I'll come get Lily around 3, Ethan managed. "Thank you for watching her." After he hung up, Ethan sat in the silence of his living room and tried to figure out what to do next. Victoria had wanted Lily to know the truth. But was it fair to tell a 9-year-old that her birth mother had been part of her life all along, had sent her presents and asked about her and loved her from a distance, only to die before they could have a real relationship? What good would that knowledge do except break Lily's heart? But keeping it secret felt like a betrayal too. Victoria had trusted him with the truth, had believed he would honor her wishes. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "The board wants to meet with you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Victoria left specific instructions in her will. You're named." His stomach dropped. Named in Victoria's will. What had she done? The rest of Sunday passed in a blur. Ethan picked up Lily from Marie's, told her gently that Miss Victoria had passed away, and held her while she cried for a woman she'd barely known but had somehow sensed was important. They ordered pizza for dinner because Ethan couldn't face cooking. Lily asked questions he couldn't answer. Why did she die? Was she sick? Will we go to her funeral? and Ethan did his best to provide comfort while his own grief threatened to swallow him whole. That night, after Lily finally fell asleep, clutching the book Victoria had sent her, Ethan pulled out his laptop and started searching for information about Victoria's death. The Seattle Times had already posted an article. Tech CEO Victoria Hale dies at 41. It was brief, factual, and completely inadequate to capture who she'd been. Victoria Hale, founder and CEO of Hale Technologies, died Sunday morning at Seattle General Hospital following a cardiac event. She was 41. Hale founded her company in 2005 and grew it into one of the Northwest's premier software development firms, specializing in cloud-based solutions for healthcare and education. She is survived by her sister, Margaret Chen, and numerous colleagues who considered her not just a boss, but a mentor and friend. Memorial arrangements are pending, survived by her sister, not by a daughter, because no one knew about Lily except Ethan, and now he carried that secret alone. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Ethan dropped Lily at school. She was quiet, subdued, still processing Victoria's death in the way children do, with questions that came in waves, and drove to Hale Technologies with a sense of dread coiling in his stomach. The office felt wrong without Victoria. Too quiet. People moved through the hallways like ghosts, speaking in hushed tones, and more than one person was openly crying at their desk. Jennifer met Ethan at the elevator, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "The board's waiting in the conference room," she said. "Ethan, I don't know what Victoria told you, but her will is complicated. You should prepare yourself." "What does that mean?" Jennifer just shook her head. "You'll see." The conference room was full, all 7 board members plus Victoria's attorney, a severe-looking woman named Patricia Wright, who'd handled all of Hale Technologies' legal affairs for the past decade. They stood when Ethan entered, and the weight of their collective gaze made him want to turn and run. "Mr. Brooks," Patricia said, gesturing to a seat at the head of the table. "Please, sit down. We have a great deal to discuss." Ethan sat, feeling like he was about to face a firing squad. Patricia opened a leather folder and pulled out several documents, spreading them across the table with practiced efficiency. "Victoria updated her will 6 weeks ago," Patricia began. "She made several significant changes, most of which pertain to you and the future of this company." "I don't understand. I'm just a project manager." "VP of Product Development as of Friday," Jennifer corrected quietly. "Victoria promoted you." Patricia nodded. "Indeed. And as of this morning, you're also interim CEO of Hale Technologies." The words made no sense. Ethan stared at Patricia, then at the board members, then back at Patricia. "That's impossible. I don't have the experience or the—" Victoria disagreed, Patricia interrupted smoothly. "Her will contains very specific language. She believed you had the vision, integrity, and leadership qualities necessary to guide this company through the transition period. She named you interim CEO for a minimum of 2 years, with the board having the option to make the position permanent based on company performance." One of the board members, Gerald Hamilton, old money and older attitudes, cleared his throat. "I should note that several of us have concerns about this arrangement. No disrespect to you, Brooks, but you're not exactly what we had in mind for CEO succession." "Then find someone else," Ethan said immediately. "I don't want this. I can't." "There is no one else," Patricia said. "Victoria's will is ironclad. If the board refuses to honor her wishes, control of her shares, which constitute 51% of the company, will be transferred to a trust that will liquidate the company within 6 months. She wanted to ensure you had the authority to protect her vision, Mr. Brooks. I suggest you don't take that responsibility lightly." Ethan felt trapped. Victoria had bound him to this company, to her legacy, in a way he couldn't escape without destroying everything she'd built. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he understood why. She was protecting Lily's inheritance, making sure her daughter's future was secure even if she couldn't be there to provide it herself. "There's more," Patricia continued, pulling out another document. "Victoria established a trust fund in the name of Lily Brooks. Upon Lily's 25th birthday, she will receive full ownership of Victoria's shares in Hale Technologies, along with all associated assets and properties. Until that time, you'll serve as trustee." The room erupted. Board members speaking over each other, demanding explanations, questioning Victoria's mental state when she'd made these changes. Ethan couldn't hear any of it over the roaring in his ears. Victoria had given Lily the company, had ensured that her daughter, their daughter, would inherit everything she'd built. Why? Gerald Hamilton demanded. Why would Victoria leave her entire fortune to Brooke's kid? What was their relationship? Patricia's expression remained neutral. That's between Mr. Brooks and Victoria's estate. The terms are legal and binding. Unless someone wishes to contest the will, which I strongly advise against, these arrangements will stand. She knew, Ethan said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Victoria knew Lily was special, that she deserved to be taken care of, and she trusted me to make sure that happened. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. The meeting dragged on for another hour. Discussions of transition plans, staff announcements, media strategy for handling Victoria's death, and the leadership change. Ethan barely heard any of it. He kept thinking about Victoria's letter, about the trust fund, about the responsibility she'd placed on his shoulders from beyond the grave. When the meeting finally ended, Jennifer caught up with Ethan in the hallway. There's something else. Victoria's sister is flying in tonight. Margaret. She wants to meet with you tomorrow. She said Victoria mentioned you in her last conversation. What did she say? Jennifer hesitated. That Victoria told her she'd finally found what she'd been looking for. Margaret didn't understand what she meant, but she thought you might. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. Victoria's last conversation with her sister had been about finding Lily, about finally, after 25 years, knowing where her daughter was. That evening, Ethan sat Lily down after dinner and tried to explain what had happened in terms a 9-year-old could understand. Miss Victoria left you some money, he said carefully, in her will. It's in something called a trust fund, which means you'll get it when you're older. Lily frowned, processing this. Why would she do that? She barely knew me. She knew you better than you think. She thought you were special, Lily. She wanted to make sure you'd be okay. But why? People don't just give money to random kids. Ethan's heart ached. This was the moment. He could tell her the truth. That Victoria was her biological mother. That she'd loved Lily from the moment she was born. That every kindness had been an expression of love that couldn't be spoken. But looking at his daughter's confused face, seeing the grief still raw in her eyes from losing someone she'd barely known, he couldn't bring himself to add that weight. Sometimes people just want to help, Ethan said instead. Miss Victoria was like that. She saw potential in people and wanted to support it. It was a coward's answer. But Lily seemed to accept it, nodding slowly before returning to her homework. Ethan retreated to the kitchen and stared at Victoria's letter, still sitting on the counter where he'd left it that morning. He was failing her, keeping secrets she'd wanted exposed, but he told himself it was temporary, that he'd tell Lily when she was older, when she could understand the complexity of what Victoria had done and why. The lie tasted bitter. Tuesday afternoon, Ethan met Margaret Chen in a private room at Victoria's attorney's office. Margaret was younger than Victoria by 5 years, with softer features but the same dark, intelligent eyes. She stood when Ethan entered, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. You must be Ethan, she said. I'm Margaret, Victoria's sister. I'm so sorry for your loss, Ethan said, the words automatic and inadequate. Margaret's expression flickered. Grief, anger, something else Ethan couldn't identify. Were you sleeping with my sister? The bluntness of the question caught Ethan off guard. What? No. We were friends, colleagues. Then why did she leave everything to your daughter? Why did she spend her last week talking about you and Lily like you were the most important people in her life? Margaret's voice cracked. I'm her sister, her only family, and she shut me out completely at the end. Ethan sank into one of the leather chairs, suddenly exhausted. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it for me. Margaret sat across from him, her hands clenched in her lap. Because I'm trying to understand why my sister died alone in a hospital, why she pushed everyone away, why she gave her fortune to a child she barely knew. And you're the only person who might have answers. For a long moment, Ethan debated whether to tell her, whether Victoria would have wanted her sister to know. But looking at Margaret's desperate face, seeing the same pain he'd been carrying since Sunday, he made a decision. Victoria gave up a baby for adoption when she was 16, Ethan said quietly. That baby was Lily, my daughter. Margaret's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, comprehension, grief. Oh God, that's why she hired the investigator. That's why she was so secretive the last few months. She pressed a hand to her mouth. I knew she'd gotten pregnant in high school. Our parents made her get rid of it, or so I thought. She never talked about it again. She didn't get rid of it. She gave the baby up for adoption. And 6 months ago, she found out where Lily was. And she didn't tell me. Margaret's voice was hollow. She found her daughter and didn't tell her own sister. I think she was scared of what it meant, of how to handle it. Ethan pulled out Victoria's letter from his jacket pocket. She wrote this for Lily in case something happened. Margaret read the letter with tears streaming down her face. When she finished, she folded it carefully and handed it back to Ethan. You haven't told Lily yet. No, I don't know how. She's 9 years old. How do I explain that her boss was actually her birth mother? That Victoria loved her but couldn't tell her? It feels cruel. It's the truth, and Victoria wanted her to know. Margaret wiped at her eyes. But I understand your hesitation. God, this is such a mess. They sat in silence for a moment, two people bound together by grief and secrets. Finally, Margaret spoke again. Our parents were monsters, you know. Our father was violent. Our mother was absent. Victoria raised me more than they ever did. When she got pregnant, they gave her an ultimatum, abort or leave. And Victoria... Margaret's voice broke. She chose to leave. She was 16 years old and she walked away from everything rather than end that pregnancy. I always thought she was stupid for it, but now I understand. She was protecting Lily even then. She never stopped protecting her, Ethan said. Everything she built, every success, it was all for Lily. She just never got the chance to tell her. Margaret pulled out her phone and scrolled through something before turning the screen toward Ethan. Victoria sent me this 2 days before she died. I didn't understand it at the time. It was a photo of Lily at the company picnic last summer, laughing at something another kid had said, her face bright with joy. Victoria must have taken it from a distance. She said, I'm looking at my whole world and she doesn't even know I exist, Margaret continued. I thought she was being dramatic, but she was talking about Lily. Ethan's throat tightened. She loved her so much, and Lily will never know. Then we make sure she knows. Margaret's voice hardened with determination. Not today, maybe. Not until she's ready, but eventually. Because Victoria deserves to be remembered as more than just a CEO who died young. She deserves to be remembered as Lily's mother. They talked for another hour, Margaret filling in pieces of Victoria's history that Ethan had never known. The poverty she'd escaped, the scholarships she'd earned, the way she'd built Hale Technologies from nothing while sending money back to help Margaret escape their parents' house. Victoria had been a survivor long before she became a success, and everything she'd survived had been preparation for the moment she gave up her daughter. Before they parted, Margaret gave Ethan her contact information. I'd like to know Lily, if that's okay. Not as her aunt, not yet, but as someone who loved her mother, someone who can tell her stories about Victoria when the time comes. I'd like that, Ethan said, and he meant it. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan stood in his bedroom and looked at the bed Victoria had asked about. It was big enough for two, but it would remain empty, a monument to possibility that died before it could become real. His phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Staff meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. They're expecting you to say something about Victoria, about the future. Everyone's scared, Ethan. He typed back. I'll be there. But he had no idea what he was going to say. How did you eulogize someone in a corporate setting? How did you honor a woman's legacy while keeping her most important truth secret? Ethan opened his laptop and started typing, words flowing without conscious thought. He wrote about Victoria's vision, her integrity, her commitment to building something that mattered. He wrote about her kindness, the way she saw potential in people others overlooked, the way she believed in second chances and redemption. He wrote everything except the truth, that she'd been a mother searching for her daughter, that she'd died before she could claim the relationship she'd sacrificed everything to protect. Wednesday morning, Ethan stood in front of the assembled staff of Hale Technologies and delivered his speech. People cried, people nodded, and when he finished, they applauded. Not for him, but for Victoria's memory. Jennifer approached him afterward, her eyes still red. That was beautiful. She would have loved it. I left so much out, Ethan said quietly. You said what people needed to hear. That's what matters. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he'd betrayed Victoria, that by keeping her secret, he was erasing the most important part of who she'd been. Over the next few days, Ethan fell into the rhythm of his new role. Meetings with department heads, strategy sessions with the board, media interviews about the future of Hale Technologies under new leadership. Everyone kept calling him CEO, and each time the title felt like a weight he couldn't support. At home, Lily asked fewer questions about Victoria but kept the book close, reading it over and over as if searching for something hidden in the pages. Ethan watched his daughter and wondered when he'd find the courage to tell her the truth. A week after Victoria's death, Patricia Wright called Ethan into her office. There's one more provision in Victoria's will I didn't mention during the board meeting. It's personal, and Victoria requested I share it with you privately. She handed Ethan a sealed envelope, a twin to the one Victoria had given him containing Lily's letter. This one was addressed simply, for Ethan. She left this with instructions to give it to you 1 week after her death, Patricia explained. She said you'd need time to process everything else first. Ethan took the envelope with trembling hands and waited until he was alone in his car to open it. Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably drowning in responsibility and guilt. I'm sorry for that. But I need you to understand why I did what I did. I could have told Lily the truth myself. I could have forced a relationship, demanded my rights as her biological mother. But that would have been selfish. Lily doesn't need another mother. She has you, and you've been everything Sarah and I could never have been. What Lily needs is security, stability, a future free from the poverty and violence I grew up in. The company, the trust fund, the will, it's all to protect her. And you're the only person I trust to make sure she grows up knowing her worth has nothing to do with money or status. I'm asking you to carry a terrible burden, to be both father and guardian of her mother's legacy, to make decisions about when and how to tell her the truth. I know it's not fair. But life isn't fair, Ethan. We both know that. That question I asked you in my office, about your bed being big enough for two, I wasn't being flippant. I was trying to find out if there was room in your life for the messy, complicated reality of what I'd discovered. I wanted to know if we could build something together. Not a romance necessarily, but a partnership in raising the daughter we both loved. You said yes. You said there was room, and even though I'm gone, I need you to remember that answer. Because Lily is going to need you to make room for the truth of where she came from. She's going to need you to be big enough to love her through the complicated grief of discovering her mother was hidden in plain sight. I died loving you, Ethan. Not in the way I once dreamed I might, but in the way that matters most, as the father of my child, as the man who made her safe when I couldn't. Thank you for giving my daughter the life I always wanted for her. Take care of our girl. Tell her the truth when she's ready. And don't let her forget that she was loved by more people than she'll ever know. Victoria Ethan sat in his car in the parking garage and sobbed. For Victoria, for Lily, for the future that had died in a hospital room before it could begin. He cried for the weight of secrets he couldn't share and the loneliness of carrying Victoria's love alone. And when the tears finally stopped, he folded the letter carefully and put it in his glove compartment next to Lily's, two pieces of a story that couldn't yet be told. That night, Ethan made a decision. He couldn't tell Lily the truth, not yet. But he could honor Victoria's memory. He could make sure her legacy lived on in ways that mattered. He called Margaret Chen. I want to start a foundation in Victoria's name, something focused on family reunification, helping separated parents and children find each other. Would you be willing to serve on the board? Margaret was quiet for a moment, then, yes, God, yes, Victoria would love that. They talked late into the night, planning and dreaming, building something that would give Victoria's sacrifice meaning beyond the fortune she'd left behind. And for the first time since Victoria's death, Ethan felt like he was doing something right. In her room, Lily slept with Victoria's book clutched to her chest, dreaming dreams her father couldn't protect her from. And somewhere in the darkness, Ethan made a silent promise to the woman who'd asked if his bed was big enough for two, he would make room. For the truth, for the grief, for the complicated reality of loving a child across the distance of secrets and death. He would make room for all of it, no matter how long it took. Because that's what fathers did. And in the end, that's what mothers did too. Even mothers who loved from the shadows, who sacrificed everything, who died before they could claim the relationship they'd never stopped wanting. Ethan would make sure Lily knew, someday. When she was ready. He would tell her about the woman who gave her life twice, once at birth and once through a fortune built on dreams of a daughter she couldn't name. But for now, in the quiet of his house with his daughter sleeping upstairs, Ethan carried Victoria's secret like a second heartbeat, steady, insistent, waiting for the moment when it could finally be spoken aloud. The weeks that followed became a study in compartmentalization. Ethan learned to divide his life into sections that couldn't touch. The CEO who led board meetings and made decisions about quarterly projections, the father who made lunches and checked homework, and the keeper of secrets who lay awake at night wondering when the walls between these versions of himself would finally collapse. The foundation launched 6 weeks after Victoria's death. They called it the Victoria Hale Legacy Foundation, with a mission statement that read like poetry, reuniting families separated by circumstance, poverty, and fear. Because every parent deserves a second chance, and every child deserves to know where they came from. Margaret threw herself into the work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She interviewed adoption agencies, connected with social workers, built databases of birth parents searching for children they'd given up decades ago. In the quiet moments between meetings, she'd tell Ethan stories about Victoria, how she'd worked 3 jobs to put Margaret through college, how she'd sent money home even when their parents didn't deserve it, how she'd built her company on the belief that technology could solve problems that seemed impossibly human. She was always looking for something, Margaret said one afternoon in early January, 3 months after Victoria's death. They were sitting in the foundation's new office, a modest space in Fremont that Victoria's estate had funded, surrounded by boxes of files waiting to be organized. Even after she became successful, even after she had everything money could buy, there was this restlessness in her. I understand it now. She was looking for Lily. Ethan stared at the photo on Margaret's desk. Victoria at 30, fierce and determined, standing in front of the building that would become Hale Technologies' headquarters. Did she ever talk about the adoption? Before she found Lily, I mean. Once. We were both drunk on her 40th birthday, and I asked if she had any regrets. She said only one, that she never got to hold her baby before they took her away. The adoption agency rushed everything. Victoria signed the papers in the hospital, and they took the baby straight to the foster family before the placement. She never even knew if her daughter had her eyes or her nose or anything. Margaret's voice cracked. 41 years old, and that was still the thing that haunted her most. The words settled over Ethan like a weight. Victoria had never held Lily, had never traced her fingers over her daughter's face, never counted her toes, never breathed in that new baby smell that Ethan remembered from Lily's first days in their home. She'd signed papers and walked away with empty arms and a heart that would never fully heal. Lily has her eyes, Ethan said quietly. The same dark intensity. The way she looks at you and makes you feel like she can see through all your defenses straight to who you really are. Margaret smiled sadly. Victoria would have loved knowing that. At home, Lily was changing in ways that both comforted and terrified Ethan. She'd thrown herself into reading with renewed passion, as if Victoria's gift of that book had unlocked something in her. She devoured novels about strong girls and complicated families, asking questions about adoption and biological parents that made Ethan's heart race with guilt. Emma at school says adopted kids always wonder about their real parents, Lily announced one evening in February, 4 months after Victoria's death. She was setting the table while Ethan finished cooking dinner, spaghetti with the sauce Lily claimed was better than anything from a jar, though Ethan suspected she was just being kind. Real parents are the ones who raise you, Ethan said carefully, keeping his focus on the stove. Biology doesn't make you a parent. Love does. But don't you think the biological parents wonder too? Like, don't you think they want to know if their kid is okay? Ethan's grip tightened on the wooden spoon. I think it depends on why they gave the child up. If they did it out of love to give that child a better life, then yes, I think they wonder every single day. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this. Do you think my biological mom wonders about me? The question was a knife between Ethan's ribs. He turned to face his daughter, saw the genuine curiosity in her face, Victoria's face, and felt the weight of his deception like a physical presence in the room. "I know she does," Ethan said, his voice rough. "I know she thought about you every single day, and I know she loved you more than anything in this world." "How do you know?" "Because she told me. Because she died before she could tell you herself. Because I read the letters she wrote, and I carry her secrets like stones in my chest. Because any parent who loved their child enough to want a better life for them would never stop wondering," Ethan said instead. "That kind of love doesn't have an expiration date." Lily seemed satisfied with this answer, but Ethan saw something shift in her expression, a thoughtfulness that hadn't been there before. She was getting older, asking harder questions, and eventually she would piece together the truth even if he never spoke it aloud. The book from Victoria, the trust fund, the foundation named after a woman who'd barely known her. All of it pointed toward a connection that Ethan couldn't explain without revealing everything. At work, the pressure intensified. The board was growing restless with Ethan's leadership, particularly Gerald Hamilton, who made his displeasure known at every opportunity. "You're too soft," Gerald said during a contentious meeting in March about laying off underperforming staff. Victoria built this company by making hard decisions, by putting profits over sentiment. Victoria built this company by valuing people, Ethan countered. "Every person you want to cut has a family, a mortgage, a life that depends on this job. We're profitable. We can afford to invest in training and development instead of cutting heads. Profits today don't guarantee profits tomorrow. We need to be leaner, more efficient. We need to be human." That's what Victoria would have wanted. The argument went in circles until Jennifer, who'd been taking notes in the corner, spoke up. Actually, Victoria left specific guidance about personnel decisions in her succession documents. She wanted the company to maintain a policy of investing in existing staff rather than cycling through employees. It's in the memo she wrote 2 weeks before she died. Gerald's face reddened. Then she was being naive. The business world doesn't reward sentiment. "It rewarded Victoria well enough," Ethan said quietly. "She built a company worth $500 million by treating people like they mattered. I'm not going to dismantle that legacy because you're nervous about quarterly fluctuations." The board voted narrowly in Ethan's favor, but he knew he'd made an enemy. Gerald had connections, influence, and a deep investment in proving that Victoria's faith in Ethan had been misplaced. That evening, Ethan stayed late at the office, reading through Victoria's old emails and documents, trying to understand the woman who'd built this empire from nothing. He found notes about product development, employee evaluations, strategy memos, and buried in a folder marked personal, a journal entry dated 6 months before her death. "I found her. After 25 years, I finally know where my daughter is. Her name is Lily Brooks. She's 9 years old. She loves books and science and asking questions that don't have easy answers. She's adopted by a single father named Ethan Brooks, who works at my company. Works for me, though he doesn't know the connection. I've been watching from a distance, trying to figure out how to tell him, tell her, tell anyone. The investigator says I could petition for visitation rights, that some birth parents maintain relationships even in closed adoptions if both parties agree. But is that fair to Lily? To disrupt her life with the truth she's too young to understand? Ethan is a good father. I can see it in the way Lily talks about him, in the patient way he handles her questions during the rare times I've been around them both. He lost his wife 4 years ago, and he's been raising Lily alone ever since. They're a unit, complete and functional and happy. So where do I fit? What right do I have to insert myself into their lives just because I finally worked up the courage to find the daughter I gave away? But God, I want to know her. I want to tell her I'm sorry for not being brave enough to keep her. I want to explain that every success I've achieved was built on the foundation of that terrible choice. That giving her up broke something in me that never fully healed, and the only way to survive was to build something so large and meaningful that the sacrifice felt justified. I'm going to tell Ethan, soon. I need him to understand before I can figure out how to approach Lily. He deserves to know the truth. They both do. Ethan closed the journal with shaking hands. Victoria had been planning to tell him for months, had agonized over the decision, wrestled with the ethics, questioned her own motivations, and when she'd finally worked up the courage to speak, she'd had less than 48 hours before her heart gave out. His phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Are you coming home soon? I made dessert." Ethan smiled despite the grief pressing against his chest. "On my way." "What kind of dessert?" "It's a surprise, but Aunt Marie helped, so it's probably edible." 20 minutes later, Ethan walked into his house to find the kitchen covered in flour, Lily wearing an apron 3 sizes too big, and Marie laughing while frosting what appeared to be a lopsided chocolate cake. "We're celebrating," Lily announced. "I got an A on my science project." "That's wonderful, kiddo. What was the project?" "Genetics and heredity. I did this whole presentation about eye color and hair color and how traits get passed down through families." Lily's enthusiasm was infectious as she described her project, complete with charts and diagrams and a family tree that traced back 3 generations on Ethan's side and Sarah's side, but conspicuously left blank the branches that would have led to Lily's biological parents. "Mrs. Chen came to watch my presentation," Lily continued, using the name Margaret had asked to be called. Not aunt, not family friend, just Mrs. Chen. "She said my research was really thorough." Ethan glanced at Marie, who shrugged. "Margaret texted me last week asking about Lily's school schedule, said she wanted to support her however she could. I figured it was okay." It was more than okay. It was Margaret keeping her promise to be present in Lily's life, to be a bridge between the daughter and the mother who'd never gotten to claim that relationship. Ethan made a mental note to thank her. They ate cake and talked about school and Margaret's latest foundation success story. A mother and daughter reunited after 30 years apart, both of them crying in the foundation office while Margaret facilitated their first conversation. Lily listened with rapt attention, asking questions about adoption and reunion that made Ethan's throat tight. "Do you think everyone should know their biological parents?" Lily asked. "Even if they're happy with their adoptive family?" "I think everyone deserves the choice," Ethan said carefully. "Some people need that connection to feel complete. Others are happy without it. There's no right answer. But if someone wanted to find their biological parents, the foundation would help. That's exactly what it's for." Lily nodded slowly, and Ethan saw wheels turning behind her eyes. She was filing this information away, building a framework for understanding that would eventually include her own story. The question was whether Ethan would be the one to fill in those blanks, or whether Lily would piece it together herself. After Marie left and Lily went to bed, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with Victoria's letters spread in front of him. The one for Lily, the one for him, and a third letter he'd found in Victoria's journal, one she'd never finished, dated 2 days before her death. "Dear Lily, I'm trying to write this letter for the 3rd time. I keep starting and stopping because I don't know how to explain what I need to say. I'm your mother, not the mother who raised you. Sarah was that, and from everything your father has told me, she was wonderful. But I'm the mother who gave birth to you, who carried you for 9 months, and then made the hardest choice of my life. I found you 6 months ago. I've been working up the courage to tell you ever since. But I'm scared, Lily. Scared you'll hate me for giving you up. Scared you'll think I didn't want you. Scared that knowing the truth will hurt more than not knowing. But you deserve the truth. You deserve to know that I..." The letter ended there, unfinished. Victoria had run out of time to find the words. Ethan's phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. Margaret's name on the screen. "I'm sorry to call so late," she said, "but I need to tell you something. The investigator who Victoria hired to find Lily, he contacted me today. He has more documents. Things Victoria requested but didn't live long enough to receive." "What kind of documents?" "Everything. Hospital records from Lily's birth. Photos from the foster family who had her before you and Sarah adopted her. Even a video. The adoption agency recorded Victoria signing away her parental rights. The investigator said Victoria wanted a complete record so that when the time came to tell Lily, she'd have proof. Evidence that it was all real." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "Why is he giving them to you now?" "Because his contract with Victoria included a clause that if she died before receiving the documents, they'd be transferred to me as her next of kin. He said Victoria was very specific about wanting them preserved, about wanting Lily to have them someday. I don't know if I'm ready to see any of that. You don't have to, but I think I do. I need to see my sister sign away her daughter. I need to understand what that cost her." Margaret's voice was thick with emotion. "Will you come with me? Tomorrow? The investigator's office is in Belltown. I don't want to do this alone. Against every instinct telling him to refuse, Ethan said yes. The next afternoon, Ethan and Margaret sat in a private conference room while the investigator, a middle-aged man named Robert Chen who looked perpetually exhausted, spread documents across the table like he was presenting evidence in a trial. Victoria was very thorough, Robert said. She wanted to know everything about Lily's placement, every detail of the adoption. She paid me to track down everyone involved, social workers, foster parents, even the nurse who was in the delivery room. He pulled out a manila folder and extracted several photographs. The first showed a teenage Victoria in a hospital bed, her face pale and drawn, her eyes hollow with grief. She was staring at something off camera with an expression of such profound loss that Ethan had to look away. This was taken an hour after Lily was born, Robert explained. The nurse told me Victoria refused to hold the baby, said she was afraid if she held her even once, she wouldn't be able to let go. Margaret made a sound like a wounded animal. Ethan reached over and took her hand, squeezing hard. The next photos showed Lily, hours old, days old, weeks old, in the arms of foster parents Ethan didn't recognize. A couple in their 50s who'd cared for her during the 2-month wait before the adoption was finalized. They looked kind, but there was a professional distance in their expressions. They'd known Lily was temporary. The foster mother kept a journal, Robert said, producing a leather-bound book. She wrote about Lily every day, what she ate, when she slept, the first time she smiled. Victoria asked me to obtain a copy. The foster mother agreed once she understood why. Ethan opened the journal with trembling hands. The entries were brief but detailed. Baby Elle slept through the night for the first time. Baby Elle reached for a toy today. Baby Elle smiled when I sang to her. Whoever this woman was, she'd cared for Lily with genuine affection. And then she'd handed her over to Sarah and Ethan and walked away, the way you did when you were a professional caregiver and attachment was a liability. And this, Robert said quietly, pulling out a tablet, is the video Victoria requested. It's from the hospital. The social worker filmed it as part of the standard adoption procedure. He pressed play, and suddenly Victoria was there, 16 years old, impossibly young, sitting in a hospital room with a social worker who looked like she'd seen too much heartbreak to be moved by one more broken girl. The social worker was walking Victoria through the documents, pointing to signature lines, explaining in a flat, professional voice that this was permanent and irrevocable and not subject to change. Victoria signed each page with mechanical precision. No tears, no hesitation. Just a girl doing what needed to be done because the alternative was unthinkable. When the last signature was complete, the social worker asked the standard question. Do you want to write a letter for the baby's file? Something she can read if she ever requests information about her birth parents? Victoria's face crumpled. For just a moment, the armor fell away, and she was just a terrified child who'd lost everything. Then she pulled herself together and said in a voice that barely qualified as a whisper, "Tell her I loved her. Tell her this was the hardest thing I ever did. Tell her I'm sorry." The video ended. Margaret was crying openly now, her whole body shaking with grief. Ethan felt his own tears tracking down his face, unable to look away from the frozen image of teenage Victoria staring at something beyond the camera's frame. Victoria never got that letter, Robert said. The social worker retired without filing it properly. I tracked her down 6 months ago at Victoria's request. She remembered Victoria, said she'd thought about that girl for years, wondering if she'd been okay. When I told her Victoria had become successful, that she'd built an empire, the social worker said it made sense, that Victoria had the kind of determination that could survive anything. But she didn't survive, Margaret said bitterly. She died before she could get any of this to mean something. She survived long enough to find Lily, Ethan said quietly. Long enough to make sure Lily would be taken care of. Long enough to leave letters and set up the trust and create a foundation that will help other people find what Victoria was looking for. That has to count for something. Margaret wiped at her eyes. Will you tell Lily about all of this? I don't know. Not yet. Maybe never. I honestly don't know what's right anymore. Robert cleared his throat. For what it's worth, Victoria left specific instructions. She said the decision should be yours, that you'd know when and how to tell Lily, or whether to tell her at all. She trusted your judgment more than anyone's." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like another weight added to the crushing pile of responsibility Ethan carried. They spent another hour reviewing documents, medical records, adoption paperwork, even report cards from Victoria's high school years showing straight A's earned while pregnant and terrified. Every piece of paper was a window into a life interrupted, a childhood stolen, a choice that would echo across decades. When they finally left Robert's office, Margaret and Ethan walked in silence through downtown Seattle, neither quite ready to return to their normal lives after bearing witness to Victoria's grief. "I'm going to tell Lily," Ethan said finally, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Not today. Maybe not for years, but eventually, because Victoria was right. Lily deserves to know where she came from. She deserves to know she was loved by someone who couldn't keep her, but never stopped hoping she was happy." Margaret nodded. "Thank you for being brave enough to do what Victoria couldn't." Victoria was brave. She just ran out of time. They parted ways at Margaret's car, and Ethan drove home with his head full of images he couldn't unsee. Teenage Victoria signing away her rights, baby Lily in the arms of foster parents, the hollow look in Victoria's eyes that suggested a piece of her soul had died in that hospital room and never fully regenerated. At home, Lily was doing homework at the kitchen table, completely absorbed in a math problem. She looked up when Ethan entered and smiled. Victoria's smile, though she'd never know it. "Dad, can you help me with this equation? I'm stuck." Ethan set down his bag and moved to look over her shoulder, grateful for the normalcy of homework and the simple comfort of helping his daughter solve problems that had clear, definable answers. Some problems couldn't be solved with equations. Some truths were too complicated for formulas. But this, helping Lily understand how to isolate variables and find solutions, this was something he could do. "Let's work through it together," Ethan said, pulling up a chair beside her. And for the next hour, they sat together doing math, the letters from Victoria locked in Ethan's desk upstairs, the weight of secrets temporarily suspended by the simple act of being present for his daughter. Because that's what Victoria had wanted most. Not for Lily to know her story immediately, not for the truth to disrupt a childhood that was happy and stable, but for Lily to be loved and supported and given every opportunity to thrive. The truth could wait. The love couldn't. So Ethan did what Victoria had trusted him to do. He loved Lily completely, protected her fiercely, and carried the weight of her origin story until she was strong enough to hold it herself. It wasn't the ending Victoria had hoped for, but it was the beginning of something else. Something that would take years to fully understand, but which started here, in this quiet moment of a father helping his daughter with homework, while her mother's ghost watched from the margins, finally at peace. The months turned into a year, and Ethan learned to carry Victoria's secret the way you carry an old injury, constantly aware of it, but functional enough that most people couldn't tell you were damaged. He threw himself into running Hale Technologies with a dedication that surprised even him, making decisions he hoped Victoria would have approved of, building on her foundation rather than trying to reshape it in his own image. The company thrived. Under Ethan's leadership, they expanded into educational software for underserved communities, launched a scholarship program for children of single parents, and maintained the employee-first culture that Victoria had insisted on, even when the board pushed back. Gerald Hamilton eventually resigned in frustration, selling his shares to a venture capital firm that understood what Ethan was building. "You're doing something remarkable here," Jennifer told him one afternoon in late November, almost exactly a year after Victoria's death. They were reviewing quarterly reports that showed record profits alongside record employee satisfaction scores. Victoria would be proud. "I hope so," Ethan said, though he wasn't sure proud was the right word. Victoria had entrusted him with her company because she'd wanted to protect Lily's inheritance, not because she'd believed he was some visionary CEO. He was just trying not to destroy what she'd built. At home, Lily was 10 now and growing more perceptive by the day. She'd formed a close relationship with Margaret, who took her to museums and bookstores and told her carefully edited stories about Victoria, the business success, the charitable work, the woman who'd built something meaningful from nothing. But never the truth. Never the connection that would make all those stories personal rather than aspirational. "Mrs. Chen says Miss Victoria used to work 3 jobs when she was young," Lily said one evening during dinner. They'd established a routine over the past year. Ethan cooked, Lily set the table, and they ate together every night unless work made it impossible. She said Miss Victoria knew what it was like to have nothing, so she always tried to help people who were struggling. That's true, Ethan said. Victoria came from a difficult background. Everything she achieved, she earned. Do you think that's why she left me the money? Because she knew what it was like to worry about the future? Ethan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Lily had asked variations of this question before, but never quite so directly. I think Victoria saw potential in you. She believed in investing in people who would use opportunities wisely. But she barely knew me. We only met a few times. Lily was watching him with that intense gaze she'd inherited from Victoria, the one that made Ethan feel like she could see through every careful lie he'd constructed. It doesn't make sense, Dad. People don't leave fortunes to random kids. You weren't random to Victoria. You were special. But why? The question hung in the air between them, demanding an answer Ethan couldn't give. Not yet. Lily was too young, too innocent, too unprepared for the weight of knowing that her birth mother had been hidden in plain sight, that every kindness had been an expression of love that couldn't be spoken. Some things don't have easy answers, Ethan said finally. Sometimes people make choices based on feelings that are too complicated to explain. Lily accepted this with visible frustration, returning to her dinner with the air of someone filing away information for future reference. Ethan knew he was running out of time. Lily was smart enough to piece together the truth eventually, and when she did, she'd remember all the times he'd deflected and evaded, and she'd wonder why he'd lied. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan pulled out Victoria's letters for what must have been the 100th time. He'd memorized every word, every comma, every place where Victoria's handwriting had wavered with emotion. The letters were both comfort and torture, proof that Victoria had loved Lily, but also proof that Ethan was failing to honor her final wishes. His phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. The foundation just facilitated its 100th reunion. A mother and son separated for 40 years. They're both crying in my office, and I can't stop thinking about Victoria, about how she never got her reunion. Ethan typed back, "She got close. That counts for something." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, does it? Or does it just make the tragedy worse, knowing she was so close but ran out of time? He didn't have an answer to that. Instead, he wrote, "How's your Thursday? Lily has a school concert. She'd love it if you came." "I'll be there. Wouldn't miss it." Margaret had become a fixture in Lily's life over the past year, attending school events and birthday parties and casual dinners with the comfortable presence of someone who belonged. Lily had started calling her Aunt Margaret a few months ago, and Margaret had cried when she'd heard it, understanding the significance even if Lily didn't. Thursday evening arrived cold and clear, the kind of November night that promised winter was coming but hadn't quite committed to snow. Ethan and Margaret sat together in the school auditorium, surrounded by other parents wielding phones and cameras, waiting for the 5th grade concert to begin. "She's nervous," Ethan whispered as the lights dimmed. "She's been practicing her solo for weeks." "She'll be perfect," Margaret said, with the certainty of someone who'd seen Victoria succeed against impossible odds and recognized the same determination in her daughter. The concert was exactly what you'd expect from a group of 10-year-olds, enthusiastic if not always perfectly tuned, with periodic microphone feedback and a few forgotten lyrics. But when Lily stepped forward for her solo, something shifted. Her voice was clear and strong, carrying across the auditorium with a confidence that belied her age, and Ethan felt his throat tighten with pride. Beside him, Margaret was openly crying. She has Victoria's stage presence, that same ability to command a room without trying. After the concert, they waited outside the auditorium for Lily to emerge. She came bounding out with her best friend Emma, both girls flushed with excitement and talking over each other about how well it had gone. "You were amazing," Ethan said, pulling Lily into a hug she only half-heartedly resisted. "It was pretty good," Lily agreed with the careful modesty of someone who knew exactly how well they'd performed. "Did you see when Tommy dropped his music? I thought he was going to cry." "I was too busy watching you," Margaret said. "You were the best one up there." Emma's parents called her over, and suddenly it was just the 3 of them standing in the parking lot. Ethan, Margaret, and Lily looking like a family, even though one crucial piece was missing. Can Aunt Margaret come to dinner? Lily asked. Please, we're celebrating, right? Ethan glanced at Margaret, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Of course, where do you want to go? That Italian place Miss Victoria took us to, the one with the really good breadsticks. The request was innocent, but it landed like a blow. Victoria had taken them to that restaurant exactly once, 7 months before her death, during a company event that had included families. Lily had been charmed by the breadsticks and the elderly waiter who treated her like royalty. Victoria had watched Lily with barely concealed emotion, and Ethan had wondered then if she was imagining all the dinners they'd never share, all the moments she'd miss. Perfect choice, Margaret said before Ethan could formulate a response. Victoria loved that place. They drove separately to the restaurant, giving Ethan time to collect himself. The grief came in waves like this, unexpected and overwhelming, triggered by small things like breadsticks and school concerts, and the way Lily smiled when she was proud of herself. He'd thought a year would be enough time to process Victoria's death, but grief didn't work on a schedule. It just existed, waiting for moments of vulnerability to remind you that some losses never fully heal. The restaurant was warm and crowded, filled with the comfortable noise of families enjoying dinner together. They were seated at a corner booth, and Lily immediately asked for breadsticks while poring over the menu like she was decoding ancient texts. I'm going to get the lasagna, Lily announced. That's what I had last time, and it was amazing. Last time? Margaret asked carefully. When Miss Victoria brought us here. Remember, Dad? It was after that work thing, and she said we should all get dinner together. Lily's expression turned wistful. She was really nice. I wish I'd gotten to know her better. Ethan and Margaret exchanged glances across the table. This was the opening they'd been waiting for, the chance to tell Lily something closer to the truth without revealing everything. But before either of them could speak, Lily continued. Emma says her parents knew Miss Victoria from some business thing, and they were really sad when she died. Emma's mom said Miss Victoria was the kind of person who made everyone around her better. Lily looked up from her menu. Is that true? Did Miss Victoria make you better, Dad? The question was devastating in its innocence. Ethan thought about that Friday afternoon in Victoria's office, about the question that had changed everything, about the 48 hours between hope and heartbreak that had redefined his entire understanding of family and fate. Yes, Ethan said quietly. She made me want to be a better person, a better father. She had that effect on people. I think she would have been a good mom, Lily said, returning her attention to the menu. If she'd had kids, I mean, she had that feeling about her, like she understood stuff without you having to explain it. Margaret made a soft sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. Lily looked up, concerned, and Margaret waved it away. Sorry, I just miss my sister. Hearing you talk about her like that, it means a lot. Did Miss Victoria ever want kids? Lily asked, with the directness of someone too young to understand why that question might be painful. Yes, Margaret said, her voice steady despite the tears tracking down her face. She wanted a daughter very badly. She would have been an amazing mother. The food arrived, saving them from having to continue that conversation. They ate and talked about school and the foundation and Lily's upcoming birthday, the conversation flowing easily around the truth that couldn't yet be spoken. But Ethan felt it pressing against his chest like a living thing, demanding to be released. After dinner, Ethan drove Lily home while Margaret followed in her own car. They'd fallen into this pattern over the past few months, Margaret joining them for family events, staying for movie nights and game nights, and the comfortable domesticity of ordinary life. She was building a relationship with Lily piece by piece, moment by moment, in a way Victoria never got the chance to do. At home, Lily went upstairs to get ready for bed, while Ethan and Margaret sat in the living room nursing glasses of wine and the comfortable silence of people who'd been through something terrible together and come out the other side, changed, but functional. She's going to figure it out soon, Margaret said finally. The questions are getting more specific. The connections are too obvious. It's only a matter of time before she puts it together. I know. I've been thinking the same thing. Ethan swirled the wine in his glass, watching the liquid catch the light. Part of me wants to tell her now, before she figures it out herself. But another part keeps thinking she's too young, that she's not ready for that kind of truth. She's Victoria's daughter. She's stronger than you think. That's what scares me. If she's like Victoria, she'll internalize this. She'll wonder why I waited so long to tell her. She'll question everything, every kindness Victoria showed her, every gift, every smile. She'll reframe her entire childhood around this secret I kept. Margaret leaned forward, her expression intense. Then tell her the truth. Not the sanitized version, not the easy story, the real truth. Tell her about the 16-year-old girl who chose adoption because she loved her daughter too much to keep her. Tell her about the successful CEO who spent 6 months working up the courage to reveal herself. Tell her about the letters and the trust fund and the foundation built on the hope that other families might be luckier than Victoria was. What if it breaks her? What if it doesn't? What if knowing the truth makes her stronger? What if understanding where she came from gives her the foundation to become everything Victoria hoped she could be? Margaret set down her wine glass. Victoria trusted you with this decision. She believed you'd know the right time. Maybe the right time is now. Upstairs, Lily called down. Dad, I'm ready for bed. Ethan stood up, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Let me think about it. Maybe after her birthday? Or maybe... Stop looking for the perfect moment, Margaret interrupted gently. There is no perfect moment for this kind of truth. There's just the moment when keeping the secret becomes more damaging than revealing it. Ethan climbed the stairs to Lily's room, his mind churning. She was sitting up in bed with Victoria's book, the collector's edition of The Little Princess that she'd read dozens of times but couldn't seem to put down. This is still my favorite book, Lily said as Ethan settled into the chair beside her bed. I like how Sarah Cruz stays kind even when everything is terrible. Miss Victoria knew exactly what kind of books I'd love. She paid attention, Ethan said. That was one of her gifts, seeing people clearly and knowing what they needed. Dad? Lily's voice was small, uncertain. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you think my biological mom thinks about me? Like, do you think she wonders what I'm like? Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The opening he'd been simultaneously dreading and hoping for. He could deflect again, could give another vague answer that protected the secret while avoiding an outright lie. Or he could do what Margaret suggested, trust Lily with the truth, trust Victoria's belief that her daughter was strong enough to handle it. I know she did, Ethan said carefully. I know she thought about you every single day. How do you know? Because she told me. Lily's eyes went wide. You knew my biological mom? Ethan took a deep breath, feeling like he was standing on the edge of a cliff with no clear view of the landing. Yes, I knew her, and she knew you, Lily. She knew you and loved you and wanted so desperately to tell you who she was, but she ran out of time. What do you mean she knew me? How could she? Lily stopped, her face going through a series of expressions as pieces clicked into place. Miss Victoria. You're talking about Miss Victoria. It wasn't a question. Lily's voice was flat, shocked, as if the truth had been hiding in plain sight and she'd just suddenly learned to see it. Yes, Ethan said, his voice breaking. Victoria was your biological mother. She gave you up for adoption when she was 16 because she had no other choice, and 6 months before she died, she found you. Found us. And she spent those last months trying to figure out how to tell you the truth. Lily stared at him, the book slipping from her fingers to land on the comforter. That's not possible. She would have said something. You would have said something. You're making this up. I'm not. I wish I was, but I'm not. Ethan pulled out his phone and opened the photos he'd never deleted. Scans of Victoria's letters, of the adoption paperwork, of the investigator's report that proved every word. Victoria left you a letter. She left me a letter. She wanted you to know the truth, but she died before she could tell you herself. He handed Lily the phone, watching as she scrolled through the images with trembling hands. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and disbelieving, and Ethan felt like he was watching his daughter's childhood crack apart in real time. Why didn't you tell me? Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. Why did you let me think she was just some nice lady who sent me presents? Why did you lie? I didn't know how to tell you. You were 9 years old when Victoria died, Lily. 9. How was I supposed to explain that your birth mother had been part of your life all along? That she'd loved you from a distance but couldn't claim you? Ethan's voice cracked. I was trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From knowing the truth? From having a chance to know my own mother before she died? Lily's voice was rising, anger mixing with grief in a way that reminded Ethan painfully of Victoria in that hospital video, young and furious and heartbroken all at once. You took that from me. You and Miss Victoria both. You decided I couldn't handle the truth, so you kept it secret, and now she's dead and I never got to know her, and it's your fault. The words landed like physical blows. Ethan reached for Lily, but she jerked away, scrambling off the bed and pressing herself against the wall like she couldn't stand to be near him. Lily, please, get out. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to look at you. Just get out. Ethan stood there for a moment, torn between respecting his daughter's need for space and the overwhelming urge to hold her, to comfort her, to somehow make this right. But Margaret's voice echoed in his head. Sometimes the kindest thing you could do was give someone room to process their pain. I'm sorry, Ethan said quietly. I'm so sorry, Lily. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought waiting would be better. But I should have trusted you with the truth sooner. I said get out! Ethan left, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like the end of something irretrievable. He made it halfway down the stairs before his legs gave out, and he sank onto the steps, head in his hands, trying to breathe through the panic constricting his chest. Margaret appeared at the bottom of the stairs, having heard everything through the old house's thin walls. She needs time, Margaret said. Give her tonight to be angry. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to help her process this. What if she never forgives me? What if I've destroyed everything by waiting too long? Then you'll deal with that. But right now she's hurting, and hurt turns into anger because anger is easier to manage. She'll come around. Victoria's daughter is strong. She'll get through this. But Ethan wasn't so sure. He'd seen the betrayal in Lily's eyes, the sense that everything she'd believed about her life had been a carefully constructed lie. And maybe it had been. Maybe in trying to protect her, he'd robbed her of the chance to grieve her mother properly, to understand where she came from, to build a relationship with Victoria before it was too late. Upstairs, he heard the sound of Lily crying, deep, wrenching sobs that tore through the house and straight into Ethan's heart. He wanted to go to her, to hold her the way he had when she was little, and nightmares woke her up scared and crying. But she'd asked him to leave, and this time her pain was his fault. Margaret stayed until nearly midnight, helping Ethan process his own guilt and fear while they listened to Lily cry herself to sleep. When the house finally went quiet, Margaret stood to leave. She'll come talk when she's ready, Margaret said at the door. And when she does, be honest with her. Tell her everything, the good and the bad. She deserves the whole truth, not just the parts we think she can handle. After Margaret left, Ethan poured himself another glass of wine he didn't drink and sat in the dark living room, staring at nothing. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, then 1, then 2. Sleep felt impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's face, the moment the truth landed, the way betrayal had replaced trust, the pure devastation of realizing her entire understanding of her life had been wrong. Around 3 in the morning, he heard footsteps on the stairs. Lily appeared in the doorway of the living room, her face puffy from crying, Victoria's book clutched against her chest like a shield. I can't sleep, she said, her voice small and broken. Me neither. Lily crossed the room and sat on the opposite end of the couch, as far from Ethan as possible while still being in the same space. They sat in silence for a long moment, the distance between them feeling wider than the few feet of cushion and air. I read the letters, Lily said finally, the ones from Miss Victoria, the ones you should have shown me a year ago. I know, I should have, I'm sorry. Stop apologizing, it doesn't fix anything. Lily pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself small. She said she loved me, in the letter. She said giving me up was the hardest thing she ever did. It was. She never stopped thinking about you, Lily. Every success she had, every milestone, it was all shaped by the choice she made to give you a better life. But I didn't get to know her. I didn't get to tell her I would have understood. I didn't get to say goodbye. Fresh tears tracked down Lily's face. And that's your fault. You kept it secret and she died, and now I'll never know what it would have been like to have her as my mom. The accusation hung in the air, true and terrible. Ethan had robbed Lily of the chance to know Victoria while she was alive, had taken away precious months when they could have been building a relationship, could have been creating memories that would outlast Victoria's death. You're right, Ethan said. I made the wrong choice. I thought I was protecting you, but what I was really doing was protecting myself. I was scared of what it would mean to share you with Victoria, scared of what would change if you knew the truth. And that fear cost you the chance to know your mother. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover that, but I don't know what else to say. Lily wiped at her eyes with the sleeve of her pajamas. Aunt Margaret says Miss Victoria wanted me to have all her documents, all the stuff about the adoption and everything. She did. It's all here whenever you're ready to see it. I want to see it now. All of it. I want to know everything about her. Where she came from, what she was like when she was young, why she gave me up, why she came looking for me, everything you've been keeping from me. Ethan nodded and went to his office, returning with the box he'd kept locked in his desk drawer for the past year. Inside were Victoria's journals, the investigators' reports, the hospital records, the video of teenage Victoria signing away her parental rights. All the pieces of a story Lily deserved to know. They spent the rest of the night going through the documents together, Ethan explaining context while Lily read and questioned and processed. She watched the video 3 times, her face expressionless, and when it ended the final time she said, "She was just a kid. She was barely older than I am now. She was 16, alone and scared and doing the best she could with impossible choices. Why didn't her parents help her? Why did they make her choose between me and having a home? Because some people aren't good parents. Victoria's father was violent. Her mother was too afraid to stand up to him. Victoria chose to protect you from that, from growing up in a house where love was conditional and safety wasn't guaranteed." Lily absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. "So she gave me to you and Mom because you could give me what she couldn't." "Yes, and she never regretted that choice, Lily. She spent her whole life making sure it was the right one, building a company, creating opportunities, setting up the trust fund so you'd be taken care of. Everything she did was for you. But she never got to tell me herself. She died before we could have a real conversation, before I could tell her I understood." Lily's voice cracked. "I keep thinking about that last time I saw her, at the company picnic. She smiled at me and I smiled back and I didn't know. I didn't know she was my mom. I didn't know to pay attention. I didn't know to remember every detail because it would be the last time." Ethan moved closer, and this time Lily didn't pull away. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her against his side, feeling her tears soak through his shirt. "She knew you didn't know," Ethan said, "and she was okay with that. She wasn't looking for recognition or gratitude or anything except the knowledge that you were happy and safe. That was enough for her." They sat like that as the sky outside slowly lightened with dawn, father and daughter processing a truth that changed everything while somehow changing nothing at all. Lily was still his daughter. He was still her father. But now there was a ghost in the house, Victoria's presence filling the spaces between them, her love evident in every choice she'd made and every sacrifice she'd accepted. "I'm still mad at you," Lily said eventually, "for waiting so long, for keeping it secret. I know, you have every right to be. But I understand why you did it. Kind of. You were trying to protect me." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes red but clearer now. "Miss Victoria's letter said you were the best father she'd ever known, that watching you raise me made her believe she'd made the right choice. She was generous with her praise." "No, she was right." Lily wiped at her face. "You're a good dad. Even when you make mistakes, you're trying to do what's best for me. I know that." The forgiveness felt unearned, but Ethan accepted it gratefully, understanding that they'd have many more conversations about this, many more moments when Lily's anger would resurface as she continued processing the truth. This was just the beginning of a long journey toward understanding. "What do we do now?" Lily asked. "With all this information, with knowing the truth?" "Whatever you need to do. If you want to learn more about Victoria, Margaret can tell you stories I don't know. If you want to visit her grave, we can do that. If you need time to be angry or sad or confused, you take that time. There's no right way to grieve someone you never got to really know. Lily nodded slowly, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Can I keep these, the letters and stuff? They're yours. They always were. She gathered up the documents carefully, as if they were sacred texts, and stood up. At the base of the stairs, she paused and looked back at Ethan. Dad, do you think Miss Victoria knew, before she died, that I loved her too? Even though I didn't know who she was. The question broke something in Ethan's chest that had been holding together through sheer force of will. Yes, I think she knew, and I think that meant everything to her. Lily nodded and climbed the stairs, leaving Ethan alone with his guilt and his grief and the faint hope that maybe, eventually, they'd find their way through this together. The truth was out now, messy and painful and impossible to take back. But it was also liberating in its way. No more secrets, no more lies, just the complicated reality of a family built across loss and love, and the impossible weight of choices made in desperation and hope. Outside, the sun was rising over Seattle, turning the sky pink and gold. A new day, a new beginning. And somewhere, Ethan hoped, Victoria was at peace, knowing her daughter finally understood where she came from and why. The weeks following that long night were harder than Ethan had anticipated. Lily threw herself into learning everything she could about Victoria, spending hours with Margaret listening to stories about the sister who'd raised her, who'd fought their way out of poverty together, who'd built an empire on determination and the kind of courage that comes from having nothing left to lose. She used to make me practice my times tables while we walked to school, Margaret told Lily one Saturday afternoon in December. They were at Margaret's apartment, going through boxes of Victoria's belongings that had been in storage for months. I hated it at the time, but she said education was the only thing our parents couldn't take away from us. She was 14 and already thinking like that, like survival required preparation. Lily handled each item with reverence. Victoria's high school yearbook, her college acceptance letters, early business plans scrawled on legal pads in handwriting that grew more confident with each page. There were photos, too, showing Victoria's transformation from a scared teenager to a powerful CEO, though the photos from her 16th year were conspicuously absent. That was the year Victoria had disappeared from family photos, the year she'd been pregnant and alone and making choices that would echo across decades. What was she like after she gave me up? Lily asked, her voice small. Was she sad? Margaret's expression clouded. She was functional. That's the best way I can describe it. She went back to school, graduated early, got scholarships to college, but there was something missing in her, like a light that had gone out and never quite came back on. She threw herself into success because I think the alternative was falling apart completely. She never talked about me. Never. Not until 6 months before she died, when she told me she'd hired an investigator. Even then, she wouldn't tell me why at first. I had to piece it together from things she said when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Margaret pulled out another photo. Victoria, at 25, standing in front of a tiny office space with a hand-painted sign reading, Hail Technologies. Every April 15th, she'd take the day off work. She never explained why, but I knew. It was your birthday. She spent those days alone, and I learned not to call her. She needed that time to grieve in private. Lily stared at the photo, tracing her finger over Victoria's face. I wish I could have met her, the real her, not just the boss who was nice to me a few times. You did meet her. Maybe not in the way you deserved, but you met her. And she saw you, Lily. She saw exactly who you were, and it made her so proud. At home, Ethan watched his daughter process her grief in waves. Some days she was angry, at him for keeping secrets, at Victoria for dying before they could have a real relationship, at the universe for the cruel timing that had kept them apart. Other days she was just sad, moving through the house like a ghost, clutching Victoria's letters and reading them over and over as if repetition might reveal something new. School became complicated. Lily's teachers noticed the change in her, the distraction, the grief that she carried like a visible weight. Ethan met with her guidance counselor, a kind woman named Dr. Patricia Reeves, who'd helped Lily through Sarah's death 4 years earlier. Loss is harder the second time, Dr. Reeves explained during their meeting. The first time, Lily was young enough that she could process Sarah's death with the resilience of childhood. But now she's older, more aware of permanence, and this loss is complicated by the revelation of who Victoria was. She's not just grieving a person, she's grieving a relationship that never got to exist. How do I help her through this? Ethan asked. You listen. You validate her feelings, even the messy ones. You don't try to fix it or rush her through it. Grief takes as long as it takes. Dr. Reeves paused. And you might consider grief counseling for both of you. Processing this kind of complicated loss benefits from professional support. Ethan took her advice. He found a therapist who specialized in adoption and family trauma, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who had a quiet office in Ballard and an ability to make even the most difficult conversations feel manageable. Lily was resistant at first, but after her second session, something shifted. Dr. Chen says it's okay to be angry at Miss Victoria, Lily told Ethan one evening after therapy. She says sometimes we get mad at people we love because we're really mad at circumstances we can't control. Like being mad at Miss Victoria for dying is easier than being mad at her heart condition or at fate or whatever. Made it so she couldn't tell me the truth before it was too late. That's very wise, Ethan said. She also says you probably feel guilty for keeping the secret, and that guilt is making you too careful with me. Like you're afraid if you do one more thing wrong, I'll stop loving you. Lily looked at him with those dark, perceptive eyes. Is that true? Ethan felt exposed, seen in a way that was uncomfortable but necessary. Yes. I'm terrified of losing you, of you deciding I'm not worth forgiving. Dad, you can't lose me. You're my father. That doesn't change because I found out Victoria was my birth mother. She gave birth to me, but you raised me. Both things are true, and neither one cancels out the other. Lily moved closer, settling beside him on the couch. Dr. Chen says families are built on choices as much as biology. Victoria chose to give me to you and Mom. You chose to keep loving me after Mom died. Those choices matter more than DNA. The maturity in her voice was startling. Somewhere in the past few weeks, Lily had grown up in ways Ethan hadn't noticed, forced into early adulthood by truths too heavy for her age, but which she was carrying anyway because she had no other choice. When did you get so wise? Ethan asked, his voice thick. I've always been wise. You just weren't paying attention. But she was smiling, and the smile was genuine. And for the first time since that terrible night when he told her the truth, Ethan felt like maybe they'd survive this. Christmas approached with the weight of significance. It would be their first major holiday since Lily learned the truth, the first Christmas where Victoria's absence was a conscious loss rather than a vague sense of something missing. Ethan wanted to make it special, wanted to create new traditions that honored Victoria's memory while still maintaining the life they'd built together. Margaret suggested they spend Christmas Eve at Victoria's house, the glass and steel mansion in Magnolia that had sat empty since her death, maintained by a property management company but untouched by human presence for over a year. Victoria loved Christmas, Margaret said when she proposed the idea. She'd decorate the entire house, invite people over, make this huge dinner even though she couldn't cook to save her life. The house deserves to be celebrated in one more time before we decide what to do with it long term. Ethan was hesitant, but Lily jumped at the idea. I want to see where she lived. I want to understand what her life was like when she wasn't at work, pretending to be just my boss. So on Christmas Eve, the three of them converged on Victoria's house with bags of groceries, boxes of decorations, and the nervous energy of people about to walk through a museum dedicated to someone they'd loved and lost. The house was exactly as Victoria had left it, immaculate, expensive, and somehow lonely despite its beauty. She had good taste, Lily observed, running her hand along the smooth marble countertop in the kitchen. But it doesn't feel like a home, it feels like a hotel. Margaret nodded. Victoria never really learned how to make a place feel lived in. She grew up in chaos, so as an adult she craved order. But order isn't the same as comfort. They spent the afternoon decorating, stringing lights and hanging ornaments while Christmas music played from Victoria's expensive sound system. Ethan cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just the traditional Christmas Eve meal his own mother used to make, while Lily and Margaret set the table using Victoria's fine china that had probably never been used for an actual meal. As the sun set and the city lights of Seattle sparkled in the distance, they sat down to eat in Victoria's formal dining room, 3 people filling a space designed for 12. It should have felt awkward, but instead it felt right. like they were claiming the space for Victoria, filling it with the family energy she'd never been able to create for herself. "I found something yesterday," Margaret said as they were finishing dessert. She pulled out a small box from her purse. Victoria kept it in her safe deposit box. "I think she was planning to give it to you, Lily, but she ran out of time." Inside the box was a necklace, a delicate gold chain with a small pendant in the shape of a compass. Lily lifted it carefully, watching the pendant catch the light. "Victoria bought this right after she found you," Margaret explained. "She told me it was a reminder that no matter how lost you feel, there's always a way home. She wore it every day for 6 months. I think she wanted you to have it, to know that she'd found her way back to you, even if it wasn't in the way she'd hoped." Lily fastened the necklace around her neck, her fingers trembling slightly. "It's perfect. Tell me more about her. Tell me everything." And Margaret did. For the next 2 hours, she told stories Ethan had never heard. About Victoria's first business failure, about the time she'd mortgaged everything to make payroll, about her habit of working until 3 in the morning and surviving on coffee and stubbornness. She told stories about Victoria's kindness, too, about the employees she'd helped through personal crises, about the scholarships she'd funded anonymously, about her belief that success meant nothing if you didn't use it to help others. "She created the foundation's mission statement a week before she died," Margaret said. "She told me she wanted to help families find each other because she knew what it felt like to be separated from someone you loved. She said every day apart was a day wasted, and if she could help even one family avoid that waste, her own loss would mean something." "Do you think she knew she was going to die?" Lily asked. "Like, do you think she had a feeling and that's why she was trying to get everything in order?" Margaret considered this. "I think she was scared. Her heart condition had been stable for years, but something changed those last few months. She started having chest pains, getting winded easily. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't want to slow down. She wanted to accomplish everything before time ran out." "She wanted to tell me the truth," Lily said quietly, "before it was too late. That's why she invited Dad to coffee. That's why she was going to explain everything. But she died before she could finish." "Yes. And I think that's the only regret she would have had, not telling you herself. Not getting to see your face when you understood who she was." They cleaned up together, washing Victoria's expensive dishes and putting away leftovers in her perfectly organized refrigerator. As they were preparing to leave, Lily wandered into Victoria's home office, a room they'd avoided earlier because it felt too personal, too much like trespassing. "Dad," Lily called, "come look at this." Ethan and Margaret joined her in the office. Lily was standing in front of a wall of photographs, a timeline of Victoria's life captured in images. There were gaps, places where photos should have been, but weren't, and Ethan realized these were the missing years. The year Victoria had been pregnant, the years immediately after, when she'd been rebuilding herself from scratch. But at the end of this timeline, tacked up in the corner, where it would be the last thing Victoria saw before leaving her office each day, was a photo of Lily. It had been taken at the company picnic, capturing Lily mid-laugh, her face bright with joy, and completely unaware she was being photographed. "She looked at this every day," Lily said, her voice breaking. "This is what she saw every morning before she went to work. Me. Happy. That's all she ever wanted," Margaret said, "to know you were happy." Lily reached up and carefully removed the photo from the wall, holding it against her chest. "Can I keep this?" "Everything in this house belongs to you eventually," Margaret said. "Victoria left it all in trust. When you turn 25, this house, the company shares, all of it, it's yours. But until then, yes, you can keep whatever you want." They left Victoria's house as snow began to fall, soft and quiet, turning Seattle into something magical. In the car, Lily was quiet, processing everything she'd learned, everything she'd seen. Ethan glanced at her in the rearview mirror and saw her touching the compass necklace, her expression thoughtful. "Dad?" Lily said as they pulled into their driveway. "I don't think I want to wait until I'm 25 to do something with Victoria's legacy." "What do you mean?" "The foundation, the company, all of it exists because Victoria wanted to make a difference. But waiting until I'm 25 means 15 more years where I'm not doing anything. That doesn't feel right." "What are you suggesting?" "I want to be involved now, not running anything. I'm 10, I'm not stupid." but I want to volunteer at the foundation. I want to learn about the company. I want to understand what Victoria built so that when I'm old enough to take over, I'm ready. I want to honor her by continuing her work, not just inheriting it. Ethan felt pride swell in his chest. This was Victoria's daughter, determined, forward-thinking, unwilling to wait for life to happen when she could shape it herself. I think that's a wonderful idea, Ethan said. We'll talk to Margaret after Christmas. Figure out how to make it work. Christmas Day itself was quiet, just the two of them opening presents and watching movies and existing in the comfortable space of family. But that evening, Ethan found Lily in her room, writing in a journal she'd started keeping since learning the truth about Victoria. "What are you writing?" Ethan asked from the doorway. "A letter to Miss Victoria. Dr. Chen says sometimes it helps to write to people we've lost, even if they can't read it. It's a way of processing feelings that don't have anywhere else to go." "That's a good idea. What are you telling her?" Lily looked up, her eyes thoughtful. "I'm telling her I forgive her for not being brave enough to tell me sooner, for dying before we could have a real relationship. For all of it, because I understand now she did the best she could with impossible circumstances, and her best gave me a pretty amazing life." "Can I tell you something Victoria said to me?" Ethan asked, moving to sit on the edge of Lily's bed. "Right before she died, she told me she died loving me. Not romantically, she was clear about that, but she loved me as the father of her child, as the man who made you safe when she couldn't. She said that was enough for her, that knowing you were happy and loved was all she'd ever wanted." "Do you think she loved you, like romantically?" Lily asked. "That question she asked about your bed, that sounds like she was interested." Ethan considered how to answer honestly without overwhelming his daughter with adult complications. "I think Victoria was trying to figure out if there was space in our lives for her. Not as a romantic partner necessarily, but as someone who could be part of our family. She was testing the waters, trying to understand what was possible. Would you have dated her if she'd lived? I don't know. Maybe. She was an incredible woman, and there was definitely something between us. But the situation was so complicated. She was my boss, she was your birth mother. There were so many ways it could have gone wrong. I think we would have had to figure it out slowly, carefully. I think she would have been good for you. You work too much and you never date, and you're going to end up lonely when I go to college." Lily smiled slightly. "Miss Victoria would have made you slow down, would have made you remember you're a person, not just a dad. Being your dad is the best thing I've ever been." "I know, but you can be other things too. Mom would have wanted that. I think Miss Victoria wanted it too." They sat together in comfortable silence, father and daughter processing grief and love and the complicated reality of family built across biology and choice. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Seattle in white and turning the world quiet and new. The months that followed became a study in healing. Lily started volunteering at the foundation every Saturday, helping Margaret with filing and data entry and learning about the work of reuniting families. She met birth parents searching for children, children searching for parents, siblings separated by adoption or foster care trying to find their way back to each other. Each story deepened her understanding of what Victoria had done, why she'd built this organization, how love could exist across distance and time and impossible circumstances. At school, Lily started a project about adoption and family structure, interviewing other adopted kids and researching the history of adoption law in America. Her teacher was impressed enough to enter the project in a state competition, where it won second place in recognition from the State Education Board. "Miss Victoria would be so proud of you," Margaret told Lily at the award ceremony. "Using your platform to educate others about adoption, that's exactly the kind of thing she would have done." Hale Technologies continued to thrive under Ethan's leadership. He'd grown into the role, learning to trust his instincts and make decisions that balanced profit with principle. The board confirmed him as permanent CEO 18 months after Victoria's death, acknowledging that his leadership had not only maintained Victoria's vision, but expanded it in ways that honored her legacy. "You've done something remarkable here," Jennifer told him during the board meeting where the decision was announced. "You've taken Victoria's company and made it better without losing what made it special in the first place. That's rare." On what would have been Victoria's 43rd birthday, 2 years after her death, Ethan, Lily, and Margaret gathered at Victoria's grave. It was the first time Lily had visited since learning the truth, and she'd been nervous about what to say, how to honor a woman she'd barely known, but who'd shaped her entire existence. The headstone was simple, elegant, exactly what Victoria would have wanted. Victoria Hale, 1984 to 2025, founder, visionary, mother. Margaret had insisted on adding that last word over the objections of distant relatives who hadn't known about Lily. She was a mother, Margaret had said firmly. That's not a race just because it was complicated. Lily knelt and placed a bouquet of sunflowers against the headstone. Victoria's favorite flower, according to Margaret. "Hi, Miss Victoria," she said softly. "I'm sorry I didn't know you were my mom when you were alive, but I know now, and I want you to know that I'm okay, more than okay. Dad's taking good care of me, and Aunt Margaret tells me stories about you all the time, and I'm learning about the company and the foundation. I'm going to make you proud. I promise." She pulled out the compass necklace she wore every day now and held it up. "Thank you for this. Thank you for everything, really. For giving me to a family who could love me right. For building something that will help other families find each other. For leaving letters so I could understand. I wish I could have known you better, but I understand why that wasn't possible. And I forgive you. For all of it." Ethan watched his daughter say goodbye to the mother she'd never really known and felt something in his chest ease, the guilt, the fear, the constant worry that he'd failed both Victoria and Lily by keeping secrets. They'd survived the truth, they'd processed the grief, and they'd come out the other side changed but intact. That evening, Margaret came over for dinner, bringing a box she'd been holding on to for months. Victoria left video messages, she said as they settled in the living room after eating. She recorded them about a week before she died. One for you, Ethan, one for me, and one for Lily. "I've been waiting until I thought Lily was ready to see it." "I'm ready," Lily said immediately. "I want to see it." Margaret pulled out a laptop and queued up the video. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Victoria's face filled the screen and suddenly she was there, alive, present, speaking directly to them from beyond the grave. "Hi, Lily," Victoria said, her voice soft and full of emotion. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you the truth in person. I wanted to sit across from you and explain everything and give you the chance to ask questions and be angry and process it all while I was there to help. But life doesn't always give us what we want." She paused, seeming to gather herself. "I need you to know that giving you up was not a rejection. It was love in its purest form. I was 16 years old, alone, and terrified. I could have chosen differently, could have tried to keep you despite having no resources, no support, no plan. But that would have been selfish. That would have been choosing my needs over yours. So I made the hardest choice I've ever made. I gave you to parents who could love you the way you deserved, completely, without reservation, without the burden of my trauma, and poverty, and fear. And then I spent 25 years hoping I'd made the right choice, hoping you were happy, hoping you'd never wonder if you were wanted." Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You were wanted, Lily. God, you were so wanted. But sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes the most powerful thing a parent can do is recognize they're not what their child needs and choose differently. I found you 6 months ago, and it felt like the universe giving me a second chance. Not to reclaim you, that ship had sailed, but to witness the incredible person you'd become. And you are incredible, Lily. You're smart and kind and curious and brave. You're everything I hoped you'd be and more. Your father, Ethan, is a good man, the best man I've ever known. He raised you with love and patience and grace, and watching him be your father healed something in me I didn't know was broken. He gave you the childhood I couldn't, and I'll be forever grateful to him for that." Victoria took a shaky breath. "I don't know how long I have left. The doctors are worried, and I'm worried, and there's so much I want to tell you, but I don't know if I'll get the chance. So I'm recording this, hoping that if I run out of time, you'll at least get to hear my voice telling you these truths. You come from survivors, Lily. Your biological father was nobody important, but I'm a fighter. I clawed my way out of poverty and violence and built something meaningful because the alternative was giving up, and giving up has never been an option for me. That strength is in you. I see it in the way you ask questions and stand up for yourself and refuse to accept easy answers. You're a survivor too. I've set up the trust fund and the company inheritance because I want you to have choices. I want you to go to any college you want, pursue any dream you have, live without the financial fear that shaped my entire youth. But more than money, I want you to have purpose. I want you to use what I've built to make the world better, to help people the way I wish someone had helped me. And Lily? Victoria leaned closer to the camera, her expression intense. Don't let anyone tell you that biology determines destiny. You are not defined by where you came from. You're defined by the choices you make, the kindness you show, the courage you demonstrate. I gave you life, but Ethan gave you everything else that matters. Both things are true. Both things are important. I love you. I've loved you since before you were born. I loved you when I signed the papers. I loved you through 25 years of wondering and hoping. And I loved you when I finally found you, even though I could never claim you as mine. That love doesn't require acknowledgement to be real. It just is. Live a beautiful life, Lily. Make it count. And know that somewhere, your mother is proud of you. Both of your mothers. We both wanted the best for you. We both loved you in the ways we knew how. The video ended. The three of them sat in silence, tears streaming down their faces, processing the gift Victoria had left them. Her voice, her truth, her love made tangible through technology and foresight. She knew, Lily whispered. She knew she was going to die, and she made sure I'd still get to hear her say she loved me. That was Victoria, Margaret said. Always 3 steps ahead, always planning, always trying to protect the people she loved. Ethan pulled Lily close, holding her while she cried. Not the angry tears of betrayal, but the cleansing tears of grief finally allowed to flow freely. They cried for Victoria, for the life cut short, for the relationship that never got to fully form. But underneath the sadness was something else. Gratitude, understanding, and the kind of peace that comes from knowing the truth, however painful it might be. That night, after Margaret left and Lily was asleep, Ethan stood in his bedroom and looked at the bed Victoria had asked about. The bed that was big enough for 2, but which would remain his alone. He thought about that Friday afternoon, about the question that had changed everything, about the 48 hours between hope and heartbreak. Victoria had asked if his bed was big enough for 2, and he'd said yes. He'd meant it literally, practically, a question about logistics and space. But maybe Victoria had been asking something deeper. Maybe she'd been asking if his life was big enough for the complicated truth of who she was, if his heart had room for the messy reality of loving a child across the distance of biology and choice and impossible circumstances. The answer was still yes. His bed, his life, his heart, all of it was big enough. Big enough for Lily, for Victoria's memory, for Margaret's presence, for the foundation and the company and the legacy that would outlast all of them. Big enough for grief and joy to exist simultaneously. Big enough for the truth in all its complicated glory. Ethan pulled out his phone and opened the video Victoria had left for him, the one he hadn't been able to watch until now. Her face appeared on the screen and she was smiling, that rare, genuine smile he'd only seen a few times. "Hi, Ethan," she said. "Thank you for everything, for raising our daughter, for honoring my wishes, for being brave enough to carry the weight of these secrets until the right moment. I know it wasn't easy, but you did it, and Lily is better for it. I need you to know something. That question I asked in my office about your bed being big enough for 2, I wasn't trying to seduce you, not exactly. I was trying to figure out if there was space in your life for me to be part of Lily's world, to be her mother in some capacity, even if she never called me that. You said yes. You said there was room, and even though I'm gone before we could figure out what that would look like, I want you to know that your answer meant everything to me. It meant I didn't die alone in my secret. It meant someone understood. Take care of our girl, Ethan. Love her enough for both of us. And when she's ready to hear about me, really hear about me, not just the sanitized version, but the whole messy truth, trust yourself to tell her right. You've been making the right choices for her since she was born. You don't need my permission to keep doing that. And Ethan, find love again. Bon? Don't let grief or duty or the memory of what might have been keep you isolated. Lily needs to see you happy. She needs to know that life continues, that love is possible even after loss. That's the final gift you can give her, showing her how to build a future that honors the past without being imprisoned by it. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being the father I couldn't be. Thank you for making sure my daughter knew she was loved, even when that love came from shadows and secrets and the margins of her life. I died loving you, Ethan. Not romantically. We never got that far. But I loved you as a partner in the most important work I ever did, protecting Lily. That love is real, and it matters, and I hope it brings you comfort when the weight of all this gets too heavy. Goodbye, my friend. Take care of our beautiful girl. The video ended, and Ethan sat in the darkness of his bedroom, crying for the woman who'd asked if his bed was big enough and died before he could answer all the questions that mattered. But underneath the grief was something else, a bone-deep certainty that they'd done right by Lily, that Victoria's sacrifice and his secret-keeping and Margaret's bridge-building had given Lily exactly what she needed. The truth, wrapped in love, delivered at the right moment by people who put her needs above their own comfort. Downstairs, Lily slept peacefully, the compass necklace around her neck and Victoria's letters on her nightstand. She would carry Victoria's legacy forward, not as a burden, but as a gift, not as an obligation, but as a choice. She would build on the foundation of two mothers' love and one father's devotion and create something uniquely her own. And that was enough. That was everything. That was the future Victoria had died protecting, and the life Ethan had fought to preserve, and the truth Lily had been brave enough to accept. Some families are built on biology. Some are built on choice. The best ones, Ethan realized, are built on both, taking the raw material of circumstance and shaping it with love into something that transcends easy definitions. That's what they were now, a family built across loss and sacrifice and the complicated courage of telling the truth even when it hurt. In the morning, Lily would wake up and come downstairs for breakfast. They would talk about school and weekend plans and the foundation project she was working on. They would be normal, functional, whole, not despite the secrets that had been revealed, but because of them. Because truth, however painful, was the foundation on which real relationships were built. And somewhere, Ethan hoped Victoria was at peace. She'd asked if his bed was big enough for two, and the answer had been yes. Yes to the truth. Yes to the complexity. Yes to building a family from the fragments of loss and love and impossible circumstances. Yes to honoring her memory by raising their daughter to be brave and kind and unafraid of complicated truths. The bed was big enough. The life was big enough. The love was big enough for all of it, past and present, grief and joy, the mother who gave life and the father who raised her, and the daughter who would carry both their legacies into a future neither could fully imagine. It wasn't the ending Victoria had hoped for, but it was the beginning of something beautiful. A family redefined not by loss, but by the courage to love completely, to grieve honestly, and to build a future that honored every sacrifice made along the way. And in the end, that was the greatest gift Victoria could have given them. Not a perfect story, but a true one. Not an easy life, but a meaningful one. Not certainty, but the courage to face uncertainty together. That was enough. That was everything. That was love.